Okay, we're ready? All right. Call the meeting to order. Want to welcome everyone here today. We're going to have, just point out some things on the agenda because you don't have it. We're going to have a budget work session starting after we get things started. Then at 5:45, we have a calendar for public hearing. And then at 6 o'clock, we'll be talking about the superintendent's evaluation, and that'll be in the executive session. And then at 7, we'll have the caring educator, and after that, we'll have citizens forum. So I know some of you, I think, are here for citizen forum. So I want to let you know, well, okay, but I'm not reading the crowd here very clearly. But I just wanted to make sure you are aware that it's going to be a number of things before we get to citizens forum. Want to welcome everyone here tonight, and we're going to begin. First, Mr. Perry, right, will lead us in the pledge. Which branch of service were you in, sir?
It's an army.
Army, or out in the Marine Corps, sir. Well, we're gonna get.
God bless you.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Okay, at this time, we will have a motion to approve the agenda. I'm going to move around the superintendent's announcements to item 14 and put item 14 where 13 is. So I'm going to change the order of the agenda so that we have superintendent's announcements last. And there will possibly be an executive session with that last thing here. I don't want to keep tying people up with an executive session and then you come out and have another item. So staff, I hope you understand that I'm switching things around. Okay, with the motion, I need a motion to approve the agenda as changed.
So moved.
And a second? Okay, second by Ms. Lawson, moved by Ms. Powell. Discussion on the amendment of the agenda. All those in favor of the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have to put it down. Okay, now we will go into the budget presentation. Mr. Butts.
Thank you, President Murphy, Board, Superintendent Stevens. Tonight, we're going to talk, we have a work session on the budget process for fiscal year 24. It's very early in the process, as you'll see, and since it's a work session, I wanted to be interactive. So anytime you have any questions, just stop and we'll discuss them as we go. We'll wait till the end. Either way, I'm fine. So tonight, I want to talk about the timeline. There's a calendar in here, the type of funds we maintain and what we budget for, the overall budget process, because we do have some new board members this year, and then discuss any programs and initiatives that board requests while we're doing this. Obviously, one of the goals we want to do is have a balanced budget at the end of the year. And I will start by saying, fiscal year 19 was the last year we had an operating budget that did not include COVID funding. If you recall, at that time, we were actually spending more money than we made, and COVID has put a large amount of funds back into our coffers. So in fiscal year 19, we actually spent 1.7 million more than we brought in. The only reason I mentioned that is because we know fiscal year 24 basically we end up our COVID funding. So any decisions we make this year could have a long-term impact on us for future years. We'll have to sustain that budget beyond 24 once the COVID funds are announced. So again, I said we're very early in the budget process. Today is February 6th, I believe it is. And as you can see, we do not even get our first bit of information from the county until March 3rd. That is when the county assessor is required to send us a certificate of value. Those values indicate the property values in the county for the multiple classes of real estate and personal property. And that determines our regular levy, our excess levy, and our bond. On March 11th is when the regular session ends. So while they're in session, obviously they can pass laws that would impact us in our budget process. March 20th is a statutory meeting. That's where we put out our proposed levy rates to the public. That meeting stands adjourned, and then we'll come back on April 18th for the statutory meeting to be reconvened to approve those finally. With the statutory meeting, once we determine what the levy rates will be, we have to publish a legal ad and then send those to the West Virginia Auditor's Office. After the session ends for the legislators at March 11th, about 2 weeks later, approximately around March 24th, we will get the Department of Education state aid release numbers. That's part of the 10-step formula. We'll also get our retirement numbers, our PEI numbers. So the items listed below the April 18th statutory board meeting, we cannot have control of. The others were required meetings and required dates we had to meet. Beyond that, we kind of control that process to a point. In the past, we've always had another budget work session right before we give the final proposed budget to the board. That is yet to be determined or set. This board will make that decision at some point in the future. The way it stands right now, the way our board meetings are scheduled, May 1 would be the superintendent proposed budget to the board. At that point, we have to put a public notice in the newspaper. It has to be in there at least 10 days prior to the final board meeting for the public hearing. And according to the way our board meetings are running, that would be May 5th. We'd have to have it in the paper by. Our last meeting in May is May 15th. So if we do not change the meeting dates, that's when our final budget approval would have to be for the board with the public hearing. Once on the 15th, we adopt that. This board would adopt that budget pending approval by the Department of Education. And then we would submit it to them before May 30th. And then they try to respond to us before June 30th for any issues they may have with the budget as proposed. Or are there any questions so far on the calendar and the process? So I thought it'd be good to talk about what we maintain, what kind of funds we maintain, which ones we budget for, and where our starting point is. So we have 6 funds that we maintain, 7 if you count school activity funds, but we don't budget for that here at the central office. So the main fund, as you're aware, is our Fund 11, that's our general operating fund. That's where we control unrestricted funds and how we spend and what programs we run. The starting point of that right now is $28,672,178. That was fund balance at the end of June 30, 22. The next fund is our debt service fund. That pays for the bond principal and payment interest. The principal is paid in May and the interest paid in November and in May. And we're starting with $3.169 million in that fund as of June of 22. The next fund is our bond construction fund. There's $392 in it. That's a carryover fund. We will not budget for that in this process. That's just part of the year-end process to start the new year budget. So we will roll that over. The reason that won't be part of the budget process, by the time the bonds are actually sold or the bond just passed, it will be way past these timelines and dates. So we won't budget for that during this process. The capital improvements fund was Fund 51. That is where this board has identified various capital projects, HVAC, roofs, et cetera, that we have in the warehouse that we have right now. Again, that will be a carryover. At this point, we don't have any new projects projected to be budgeted in Fund 51 because the bond projects come out of Fund 31.
Does that include the capital improvements Fund 51? Does that also include the freezer that we had approved?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And there's no other things that we need outside of what we've approved, the freezer, the building?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
So in there are some projects that this board has put in this before we pass the
Yes.
bond. So some of that money can be freed up. And what I'll say, and caveat with that, and Ron knows, and some of you know has been on the bond calls with our council, is part of our bonds could not contingent bond, but had an item in there for SBA funding of $25 million. If that doesn't go through, we still have to do the project. So while we have $28 million on the book starting, some of that may need to be used to complete the projects in the bond as we move forward, depending on the outcome of the SBA request.
Can we also,
No, go ahead.
we also could get some additional funding from this?
That's correct. That's
To
correct.
go the other way.
Right. But as a minimum, we have to meet what we said was in the bond call.
Can you provide us with, I guess, more of a detail, because there will be something that's a little bit more detailed than overview. Would you be able to give us more of a breakdown what the Fund 51 looks like?
Yeah, if you go to the meeting, the last meeting in December, I
Okay,
believe it was, it's the last time I gave you guys
Okay.
the full report, and then you wanted to switch to just a summary one-page report. And
Yeah.
that happened to change, so if you go back to the last December meeting, it will tell you what all the projects were at that
okay,
time.
great.
And we thought, if I can run a new report, and get it out to everybody as soon as we're back.
Yeah,
Funds,
I have it here, which pages?
it won't be on that pack, that's all funds together.
Okay.
I'm talking about the meeting from the last meeting in December. December
I mean, that's-
18th.
That's what this is, December 31st.
That's when that report was run, but it wasn't for the
Oh.
December 19th meeting would have been for the November 30 month end.
gotcha.
Okay.
So if you go to that board meeting packet, I can run a new report and send it to everybody tomorrow. I'll do that. Our special revenue fund is Fund 61, that's restricted fund, that's made up of mostly state and federal grants and our child nutrition program. And that beginning balance at June 30, 22 is $5.6 million. We will budget for that, and we'll talk about that later in some slides. And then our last fund is federal stimulus fund, that's our COVID funding. We're gonna carry about 5.3, that's the estimate for the salaries at that point. The rest of it will be carried over, so the only thing we'll budget is the salaries, because that gets projected in our Weaver software, green screen software. So staffing numbers will be projected, everything else will be part of the carryover process when we get to that point. And then lastly, of course, we have school activity fund, but we don't budget for that at this level, at the school level. So I thought it'd be appropriate to talk about our revenues and then our expenses and where revenues come from. So we have three main sources. We have local, state, and federal. Local, again, is what we control, and that's mostly what's in our fund, or Fund 11. It's made up of our taxes, and of course, there's three parts. There's the regular levy, the excess levy, and then the bond levy. And then that also includes PALAs, that's payment in lieu of taxes. That's where the Macy's and the Procter & Gamble and Ezra and some other companies that have been granted tax relief under the PALA agreements.
On the, on the pilot, we need to, as a board, get more up to date. There's an old expression, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And, that's what's happened to the school board, I think. And that the most recent Development Authority, pilot projects is going to a fund that the county council has created called the Quality of Life thing, I believe.
Something similar.
Yeah, and in the past, when pilot projects were created, the school board received a percentage of that money in proportion to like we received the local revenues. And the county council created this thing. Unfortunately, I voted for something. I think I was in one of the board at the time. When the council approached us about this thing in one of the pilot projects, and anyway, I made a mistake. But our role as advocates for education in the community, I think there may be a point where we may have to sit down with the council. First, we sit down and look. I've given the pilot project agreements that I had to date to Mr. Butts. And we may have to sit down and look at that. I do not want to get into an interagency legal battle. But I think that we have a responsibility as advocates for education to make sure that those monies that are being paid in lieu of taxes by agencies will be treated the same as though they were an agency paying those taxes. And my primary concern here is, the question I'm asking, it's not a fact. The question I'm asking is public education and our excess levies paying for economic development in the state? And if you look back in the day when I was in the legislature, the Constitution says, in 4 cases, Supreme Court's ruled that public education comes right after the state has to pay its debts. There's a priority. That's why when, back in the day when they had shortfalls, public education always had a lower percentage in the cuts, like higher ed, state police, and all the other people would get a 10% cut. We would get a percentage less than that. So we have to sit down and look at this as a potential issue that we need to ask questions about. First, we talk amongst ourselves, get educated along with our staff, and our council that this is an issue that I think that we're not fully aware that, we may have to, as our goal is advocates of public ed, first explore, then decide the avenue we want to pursue. I do not want to threaten legal suits because that's not the way to waste taxpayers' dollars in court fighting with each other. But I'm concerned about this. If I made a mistake, Mr. Butts, besides my one vote, did I articulate it right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, proceed.
So in addition to our taxes, our other local income is interest income. In prior years, we didn't talk much about it. It's been pretty low with all the federal rate hikes. Between 4% and 4.5%, depending on where our money is sitting for us. That is a substantial amount of interest income each year. We also have the P card rebate program, which again is similar to a personal credit card rebate program. There we get about 1.91% back. We also have an E-rate program. That's about 800,000 a year. And then we have an indirect rate miscellaneous, and that stuff is a portion of that, our indirect rate, which is based upon the federal grants, and that rate is yet to be determined. It will be determined probably mid-April when we get that rate from the state. After local, we have our state funding. It's pretty simple. It's a state aid formula, and then state aid grants, both operational and capital. The operational grants like professional development, adult ed, alternative ed, literacy, truancy, and then there's a portion of our child nutrition program, which is made up of both local, state, and federal. Our capital programs for the state aid would be like SBA projects. And then we get reimbursements from the state for our national board certifications and our tuition reimbursement for student employees. Then federally, the programs there, the big ones are Medicaid, and then we get operational grants and capital grants. The operational grants are the title programs, Title 1, 2, 3, 4, the IDA, and of course the child nutrition program. When the expenses,
Before you go, under grants, as we're doing the school bond thing, we have to be questioning, with all the stimulus money and the highway bill that they passed with whatever they called it at the time. The most recent, the federal legislation, there are grants in there, for energy savings or other things. We have to make sure we're capitalizing on those things as well in our upcoming school bond. I know that's beyond this general budget.
it is beyond that. That'd be a separate grant request, somebody writing a grant and submitting.
Can I ask a question about, let me get back to it. If the legislature changes the state aid formula for both service and professional, that will change our budgeting process somewhat?
It won't change the process, it will change the impact it has on our general fund, and I'll get to that when we get to the Fund 11 in more detail. This is more an overview of the big picture, and then we'll talk about each fund a little bit more. But you're right, that could have a very substantial impact to us, and we don't have to talk about that. The reason it's gonna have a big impact on us because 80% of our budget is salaries and personnel. It used to be around 85%, but since we had the influx of COVID money, it's dropped that percentage down because we used the COVID money rather than personnel. So when we're talking about people, we're talking about salaries. It's both contracted salaries for service and professional. It's our housing allowance, it's our sick leave bonus. It's our substitutes of day to day and both the firm subs and classroom coverages. And of course, our benefits are the big ones are PEI, retirement, and then we have other for dental, vision, life, etc. Then everything else is 20% is supplies, textbooks, transportation, utilities, and everything else we have. Some of that we don't have a lot of control over, i.e. utilities, fuel costs, they are what they are, food costs. Where we do control what's left out of that 20% would be supplies, textbooks, and items like that. So there's very little we can control outside of salaries, utilities, and fuel. So now I'm going to talk about the individual funds more specifically. So Fund 21 is our debt service fund. Again, that's bonds. So what this slide represents is what we know today in our current 2020 refunded bonds. This number will change when we get our numbers back from the levy process, when we do that in March 20th and submit that, our bond council is working with the municipal bond commission to determine what the additional funds to be raised will be. So what's on this side is what's existing today, before we sell the bonds in April and May. And it's broken up again of principal and interest, and we have a reserve that the municipal bond commission keeps, there for us. With that being said, the current bonds we have expires in fiscal year 25. So at the end of 23, we have $7.855 million left to pay back of those 2020 bonds. And again, they'll be readjusted once the new bonds are calculated by the municipal bond commission. Then my next fund that we maintain is Fund 61. Again, there's a restricted funds. We don't have a lot of say in what they're for, but how we spend them is based on the granting agency. So for the state funded programs, we have both staff development and professional service. Those are formula driven. That's a number that comes straight from the 10-step formula. Faculty Senate, again, is $400 per qualified state aid funded position for teachers. Our Step 7D mentoring, that is relatively new the last couple of years, and it has continued to increase. The current projection for Step 7D mentoring money for next year is about 1.7 million. In 23, the year we're in, it's about 700,000. So you can see it has the potential to be a very large jump. The reason I wanted to point that out separately is we have staff that are coaches, interventionists, and so forth, and we may have to change how we identify those to some type of mentor to have them be part of this process, because again, $1.7 million is a lot of money for that area. So while we have the employees, we may need to change what the responsibility is. Other grants are small, truancy diversion, alternative ed, English, they're all continued grants, and that's what we budget for them, and we typically get those year after year.
Question. You mentioned that truancy and the alternative education. But I know the legislature is looking at part of the discipline bill that they're trying to pass in terms of moving students out of the classroom. Do you foresee possibly that alternative education amount going up? Because maybe
I would hope that if the state changes a law or process that they fund it, that's not always the case, but I would expect for them to make that change. We were way early in that process. Again, legislation is still in session, and they could change their direction or not even pass anything at all. But I would have the expectation if they're mandating a new process that they would fund that.
Jim,
Yes, ma'am.
where are we with the K-5 alternative school, alternative education program that the board wanted?
That will be part of this process. Again, we're very, very early. We don't even know what our revenue numbers would be to know where our availability to spend. Those will be decisions that we'll make between now and May 1st. That would be a priority that senior leadership will acknowledge and look at, but there'll be other programs that may have to change in order to accommodate that.
Is it a line item currently on in that budget?
So again,
Is there currently a line item designated K-5 in that
we
particular?
don't have
budget?
any budget right now for 24. This is the start of that process, and the process will look at what we currently have. And then there'll be a section where we meet with our staff, our principals, the board, who will tell us what other projects and programs they would like to run, what other initiatives they'd like to run. And at that point, we'll have to say the total funding is X. This is what each program costs, what's our priorities. That's typically what we have done in past years. I wish we could do it all. We won't be able to.
Sure, I guess in my head though, when I'm doing my own budget at home. And I get that it's completely different, but when I'm doing my budget at home, I'm listing out everything before I necessarily prioritize it as, need versus want. But then I'm also making sure that it's in the correct, category of whether that's utilities or, food or medical or whatever that is.
And we'll
So
get to that.
I guess my question is it even listed anywhere in a preliminary list?
It is on our radar screen. We know that.
Okay,
Has a dollar amount be assigned to that yet? No.
right.
We
I'm not
are-
asking for a dollar amount,
We're
I'm just
aware.
asking for if it's on the list.
Yeah, we're aware, it's been a request for several board meetings.
We're moving to actually have a pilot. In the fourth 9 weeks this year. So that we can ascertain how much it's gonna run, you know, and how much it's gonna cost, what's the scope of that project gonna be? How many people it's gonna involve? So.
Because it's circled around the conversation we had about RBTs in the past, and are they effective and what are we doing with them? So it's part of the discussion, we just
Sure.
haven't.
Well, just as point of clarification. The board has not taken a vote on this matter, where all five of us sit. But in just listening to two of the members here and myself, there's strong interest in it, and as you mentioned, senior staff will work on this, but I have passed out for the board's information a timeline of important dates. And this board is ready, if alternative school is not on there, there's a number of us here, we will put it on there. And these dates say we'll have to make cuts somewhere else, and I want the board members to be aware when those deadlines are to make those cuts.
Correct.
The learning environment is being disrupted by disruptive students. And we're trying to come up with an alternative school, and we want the senior staff to really have a come to the open moment here and realize whether you will bring it to us or not, it's gonna leave here, I think, with that support. So please, please.
Mr. Butts' role here, Mr. Butts' role here tonight is to tell you the process of how the budget is developed. We will be working throughout, you know, February and March, putting those projects together. We've heard what you said in the past. That's why we talked about having a pilot program in the spring so that we know what's gonna be involved in the fall. We've got an advisory group who are meeting and discussing about all that. You know, I'm not gonna promise that everything that's gonna be on the budget, that we're ready to present that to you on February the 6th. But we are planning to have this as a pilot program, and you don't have that pilot program unless you're serious about moving forward with it.
Well, I mean, my only concern though is if I'm going back to the dates. That Mr. Butts had presented earlier, we're supposed to submit the budget to the Department of Education May 30th. That would mean that we would have needed to vote on it and be aware of all of those evaluations, whether, you know, what it cost, was it effective? What pros and cons are there to that? How many people, like all that carries dollar signs, we would need to know that prior to the May 15th budget hearing. Which means the second, that fourth 9 weeks isn't even completed at that point. So how can we provide, how can we get an accurate read on what it would cost if we haven't even completed those 9 weeks?
We don't have to do the pilot program to put this in the budget. This was our idea to get a head start on it after the year had already started. It wasn't in this year's budget. We were adding it so that we can do a pilot program, so we can understand it a little bit better, and actually look at the nuts and bolts of it so that we can know more. We don't even have to have that to plan for next year. So.
But I'm hearing you say that we would need it in order to have a good plan for next year.
We're gonna utilize that so we know more about it before next year, yes.
A budget is a best guesstimate, so any information we have that makes that guesstimate better.
I know, but I'm not following something here. Apologize, and maybe it's my blonde hair, okay? If you're saying that the fourth set of 9 weeks, which is the fourth marking period, and it's not over until the end of May,
Correct.
how can there be an evaluation and an accurate understanding if 3 weeks prior to that, so a third of that 9 weeks isn't even included in that 9 week
We're
pilot piece?
Let me see if I can explain this. This is a budget item that we have heard that this group wants for next year. We have heard from our principals that they would like to try to get things started this year. We're gonna use that fourth 9 weeks to evaluate and see what we can do to better plan for that. But we'll be budgeting and planning for it well before that. We were planning to do that even before there was gonna be a pilot program there.
But how?
We don't have to have the pilot program to evaluate it.
But But how would you get an accurate number for a budget?
You have to use your best guess, that's
Yeah,
all
we-
we have.
Just like we would, if it wasn't gonna be a pilot program, we would just be creating this and guessing what we need.
It's like when we did with the RBTs, we estimated we would need, I think, 8 of it.
Just like when we did the alternative school for high school, I mean, that's the way that's started.
Sure, but I guess I don't wanna spend money if it's not effective, so I guess my thing where I'm sitting is the timeline correct? And insofar as. If it's not gonna work, why would we budget it in? But if it does work, we would need an accurate number,
Well, if a
or
budget,
more accurate numbers.
Let me,
So,
it's just that, a budget.
with permission of the board, I'd like Ms. Burkhart to jump in here for a second, because I know you're working on this plan.
Sure. So we have a committee that has been working the entire school year to create a behavior academy for K-5 students. This committee has met at least once a month and has been working really hard to determine a budget, which we do have now. And as far as a pilot program, I'm not sure that's the direction the committee decided to take. But we do have a prepared budget and a complete presentation, but we do have to go through the budget process. We will be bringing it up. It will be on a very high priority of mine. And I will share that with senior staff as well. But we do have a prepared budget,
okay,
and we have worked and looked at many different avenues. Also looking at some of our community, providing some support. And for example, social workers that we would not be paying for. So we're looking at a lot of different avenues, but we have prepared a budget
great.
Okay.
and it's ready to go for next
That
year.
helps me understand it a little bit better in timeline for the budget.
Okay.
All right.
And again,
Mr.
remember,
Lutz.
we have a date to be determined for another work session with the board before we get to May 1st. And that is yet to be determined.
We'll probably have several.
Yeah. But I was just going off what we've done in the past. So Fund 61 to continue, we also have federal restricted programs, and these are your big programs, your Title 1, 2, 3, 4, and your IDA special ed, for your school age and preschool. Those are passed through, the federal grants passed through the Department of Ed. The two on there, HIDA and Nacho, are grants that are either direct federal or passed through another entity to us. And again, I listed child nutrition here because they cross all three: state, local, and federal funding. And I have to be determined, because we do not know our federal indirect rate yet for federal grants and how much money that will generate until we get that rate.
For the audience's benefit, and mine as well, what does Nacho mean?
I would have to look that up. I know it's one of their market initiative programs. There's multiple companies within under that. And they relate to the opioid addiction, but I don't know off the top of my head what it exactly stands for, but we can get that to you, and I'll put that in the email tomorrow.
Thank you.
Is the height is the high intensity drug traffic area or something, Nacho, I don't, and with that way. And again, that one leads through Martinsburg initiative.
And IDEA is Mr. Lutz.
Yeah, that's special ed programming. We receive roughly 5 million a year from federal programs, and we spend about 50 million a year for special ed. Lastly is our Fund 71. As far as restricted funds go, and again, that's our COVID funding. The majority of this funding runs out September 24. What that means for us is the staffing would need to end by June 30th, 24. You can now carry staff over through September. Because once you're on staff, they have to remain for the year, we'll have a funding source for that. There's a few smaller grants in there besides the big COVID grant. We have an IDA special ed grant that also ends at the same timeline. There's about 8 people in that COVID funded grant. And then the big grant, the ESSER funding, there's 91 people in the current. So you're looking at 99 people right now funded in Murphy County with federal COVID dollars that we know is going to expire basically at the end of fiscal year 24. So we need to be cognizant of that before making decisions about the 24 budget and how we move forward.
That is a big issue. We have a lot of people that will do great jobs, but the money, that the Fed spread throughout this nation will not be there in June of 2024.
Correct.
And so those people have to start thinking, we have to start thinking about how we can assimilate them back into the regular system or we're not gonna get the kind of money from the state that the feds were
There
giving.
won't be any new money coming from the state for this position. Our state fund is based upon enrollment, so only as enrollment grows will our funding grow. With that being said, that's why I think it's mindful for us to be aware during this process this year, we should be getting very conservative with how many new people we add, because we know we have 99 people that need to come back to some position at some level. We will have some growth in the next 2 years, but also at the same time, we have built a reserve because we've had this COVID funding. And, we just need to be mindful of how we get through this process with those 99 people. With that, I want to get to Fund 11. That's really what we control. These are the programs where the K-5 transition would fall into, and any other program we run. This is what we have control. What I want to start with is the state aid formula, because that's where the majority of our funding comes from. I'll be very brief, but it is a 10-step formula about the state. It is, for the most part, driven off our student enrollment. Step 1 is the professional staff. They basically take how many students you have, divide it by 1,000, multiply it by how many staff to the ratio, and that's the funding you get for your district. Step 2 is the same concept, but that's related to service personnel. And again, I'll talk a little bit later. I have other slides about how many people are in those categories and whether we're over or underperforming in those categories. Step 3 is the fixed charges. Again, that's the benefits related to that, through Social Security, retirement, again, dental, life, these all fall under the fixed charge category. Step 4 is transportation. We get 87.5% of what we spend from 2 years prior as costs. So as you know, as fuel costs continue to go up, we're getting reimbursed 87.5% of that, but from 2 years ago. Step 5 is relatively new. It's been around the last several years. It is the student support services. This is your nurses, attendants, and some other workers. That's 5 per 1,000. Step 6 is your current expenses substitutes. There's a formula that provides money to the counties for substitutes that you have. This is where your maintenance costs and other costs of the district come in. Step 7, there's a bunch of categories under step 7, but the main piece of that is instructional improvement. Again, that's a state aid formula. That's nothing that we request. They tell you how much you're getting for that allotment. And that's where 7D falls under this category. That's where I mentioned that we're going to have estimated right now about 1.7 million for mentors. Step 8 is pretty simple. It's 1 through 7 all added up. They give a total for the state. And then the state looks at step 9, our local share. So they look at our regular levy, whatever that number is, they take 85% of that out of the state aid formula. And that's the amount that we get in total we must have. So that's the state aid formula. And again, that will be impacted by legislative changes that's going on right now.
So the student support services, you said that's nurses and whatever.
There's a couple categories: nurses, attendants, support service. I think counselors. I don't remember who's on that group. I can get that information for you. If I didn't put it in the slide, I can't remember.
I just want to make sure I heard you right.
I think I talked about it in another slide in here.
Yeah, it's on the slide.
So with that, again, the starting point is net enrollment. For us right now, the state has us, it's 20,125, and I will say that's adjusted for James Rumsey. But we are the fiscal agent, so their numbers, that's why it was a little higher than what we reported in the past. There's about 105 kids in the adult, or 105 people in the adult community education program that's part of our state aid formula now. And then they also added charter schools, so they had an adjustment in our numbers going forward for charter schools. So right now, the funding, the way it's set, will be based upon 20,125 students from the state. And then what happens when we get to October of 24, we do an actual count, and at that point in December, we'll get an adjustment for increased enrollment.
You're talking about the charter schools. Will the charter school money come through for the students in charter schools?
It will not come through us now. but the students enrolled are adjusted through the formula to reflect Clark County.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next slide, I've really talked about who's included in each category. And again, right now, the state and professionals will pay for 1,446 staff. We have employed 1,455 staff. Now, these are state aid positions only. This is not our federal programs. It's not the 99 people I talked about COVID. These are just state aid funded positions that are eligible under the code. So that is about 10 people over formula, 9.65 people over formula. Our student support, again, is our counselors, nurses, and attendance workers. So Damon, that's the group that makes up that, and it's 5 per 1,000. Or they'll pay for 99.7. We actually have employed 87.6, and again, that does not include contracting services. We had difficulty in the past getting nurses and some other staff that we actually are expending money on, but they're not reflected in personnel, but we do get reimbursed for the 99.7, even though we only have 87.6 employees. We're just spending that money as contracting services.
Okay. First question, where does that extra money go? Does it just stay in that,
At the end of the day, we get one pot of money for state aid, so it all
Okay.
becomes a piece of the 10 steps that gives us one pot at the end of the day.
okay. And then let's say in the best ideal world where we've got rainbows and unicorns, and every position is filled, how many would we
And we're there.
end up being over the
We're
99?
there now. We've hired some additional staff. Some of these nurses right now are paid out of COVID funding because they're available to be paid out of COVID funding. So some of those will come back to this process, to this side of the ledger and the general fund are unrestricted.
Okay, so I apologize, I want to make sure I asked the question. Are we short-staffed in this area of student support?
I don't
Anywhere.
believe we are because we're paying
Okay.
for staff out of COVID. Now, I don't know off the top of my head how many of the 99 are nurses, but I know there's nurses in there that will
Okay.
come over to the side and that funding stuff. And when we first started, we did not have a nurse at every school. With the COVID money, we made sure we had a nurse at every school.
So when the COVID money runs out,
That would be one of the decisions we will need to make, but there is funding for that currently. And then service personnel, they give us 43.97 staff per 1,000. So they will pay for 877.67 staff. We have 1,027.798 employed, so that's 150 people over the formula. So when you take the 3 categories of staffing, we are 147 staff over the formula, and I'm counting the 99 in the COVID funding. We pay for those those additional staff out of our excess levy. But at some point, again, if you look back to 2019, when I started with the discussion tonight, before COVID funding, we were spending 1.7 million more than we had. So we just need to be mindful as we move forward past 24, the impact. What's employed there, Damon, does not include at the very bottom the non-formula positions. And again, you can see who's included, not included there. And HR is another category that's not listed, that's not included in the state aid formula. And I believe off the top of my head, we have about 65 people that we're paying for out of local dollars that we do not receive any funding for.
How many?
I believe it's 65 off the top of my head.
But what you're saying, you're saying 147 over formula, but that doesn't mean that the,
Those,
what I want to be clear is, so that everybody understands is, just because it says we're 147 over formula doesn't mean we're overstaffed.
that means we're underfunded by the state. My opinion is what we've asked for the legislature for years.
We've
And again,
always-
this is where we stand today. This is before there's legislation out there that's talking about K-3 classroom aid. So none of that's talked about today. We don't know where that legislation's going.
I just want to make sure everyone, I understood that, but I'll make sure everybody else understood it as well.
We
Yeah,
have been underfunded for years and years and years.
you know, most counties in the state, when you look at the state aid comps on service personnel, almost all of them are the formula. And I don't believe it's because we're efficient. I believe it's because we're unfunded. Just for the record.
but the professional people, you have to have so many of them I'm going back and dating myself to the eighties, so help me a bit. I see it says 72.3 per 1,000.
Yes,
Back in the day, you had to have,
66 per 1,000 classroom teachers.
yeah.
That's part of the 72.
Okay, so,
I just don't want to provide a whole bunch of
I know,
information in a
but-
session.
but out of the 6.3 people who are not classroom teachers up in the 72.3, I always thought that directors and coordinators were included in that, those 6
They,
people.
they are not. They are not.
So all the directors and coordinators we have in the county, at all the different locations, are all paid out of local excess living money,
That is correct.
and,
Or any unrestricted funding, yes.
or, yeah, if they're part of a federal.
Now, these don't include federal.
Pardon?
This does not include our federal staff.
Okay, so these directors and coordinators.
It says including federal programs.
So you have like JROTC, that's paid for through the federal money. Is it not?
Not fully paid. They give us money for 200 days. I believe they're employed 240. And they will pay 100% of their salary. That's a program we choose to run and we subsidize it.
Okay.
Again, it's another situation where, we're not, in my opinion, fully funded.
And like in accounts, when we handle we handle money. They allow you a certain amount of money to pay for the people who are handling.
That's called indirect rate. So we have a calculation that we apply to all federal dollars, and that money is transferred from the fund 61 or 71 restricted into our fund 11, where these people are employed as.
Okay,
But it's not a direct funding.
it's not direct funding, but these people, the accountants, the JROTC, I don't know about the other groups, but we
Well,
do
it's
receive
physical
money.
therapist occupations. No. No, we're choosing to pay for them with our general funds, and the general funds, again, for local was made up of interest income, P-card income, E-rate income, indirect rate. That is how we end up paying the excess levy. So all those pots of money support these functions. So our IT department, our PTs, our OTs, treasurer, director, county nutrition director, none of those are funded as part of the state aid fund. And again, we've asked the legislature and past meetings with them. When we have our board meetings with them in November, we've asked them
But
to recognize that.
hold that thought. We have on our schedule at 6:45. I don't think it's gonna take long. But we had a public hearing on the calendar. And I'd like to handle that right now. So that, if there's anybody here who wants to speak about the calendar, I want to stay on schedule. And then we're gonna come back to you.
Okay, I'm down to one slide.
Okay, well, I want to go this 3 minutes over our schedule, so let's go ahead and let Ms. Clerk come up and talk about the calendar. Everybody hold your questions and thoughts. Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Benson.
That's all right. It's a work session. I'm good.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Stevens. It is that time of the year again to look at our draft calendar for next year. A little bit about the process. We had 17 individuals that served on our calendar committee. It was very diverse. We had principals, service personnel, teachers, coordinators, attendance directors, and parents that helped us with our direct establishment of the calendar. So at our first meeting, all of these individuals were present. We had a lot of conversation about this year's calendar and also some of the changes that we possibly could look at for this coming school year. When we looked at the changes, what we decided was that we would create 3 draft calendars. And we looked at draft A, B, and C. And we gave the calendar committee, we sent those drafts out to everybody and asked them to review it. And we gave them then the opportunity to come back and review them. If I could just say a really important thing about our calendar, we are provided a guidance document that we have to follow. So even though members of this committee may have had some ideas that were good, we are kind of restricted in how we can create the calendar and we have to use that document to guide our direction. So looking at this calendar that we chose, the calendar, just some backdrop information. We do have to have 180 instructional days. High school seniors need to go 175 days. In this calendar, we have to provide for professional learning days and also 6 opportunities in the calendar for faculty senate, and that is in code. One of those faculty senate meetings needs to be at the beginning of the school year and one at the end. And then we also have to make sure in our calendar that we have faculty senate in the month of October, December, February, and April. And this calendar does reflect that. According to this calendar, our first day for staff would be August the 14th. Our first day for students would be August the 21st. Our last day for students, and it would be tentative based on the number of snow days we would possibly have, would be May 24th, and our last day for staff would be May 28th. When we create this calendar, we also have additional minutes put into our day so that we can have faculty senate and our professional learning days. And if needed, if you know, this year, if we have 5 snow days, the first 5 snow days are free days. We don't have remote instruction, but days 6 through 10 would be. And because we have these additional calendar minutes throughout the week and throughout the year, every school is 30 minutes additional, we're able to do these things. One of the concerns and discussion during our calendar committee meetings was that teachers really felt strongly about having more time for them to work and more support for them. So if you look at your calendar, it's not a part of the official calendar, but we talked to the superintendent, and with his recommendation, we wanted to also have approved teacher prep delay days, and we strategically placed them. And we wanted to have that part of the approval process so that teachers had these days for time to work. And they were very instrumental in supporting these days as well. So if you look at the bottom under school holidays within, we just added October the 18th, December the 13th, and March the 13th. And reasons for these days was after the first 9 weeks, it gives teachers time to plan, do the report cards. In December, the SAT scores drop. It gives them time to work on looking at that data and sharing that with the teachers and preparing instruction for the students. And then in March, near that third 9 weeks as well. So they have a little extra time to prepare. These delayed days would be nothing but teacher time to work in their classroom and to use as they see necessary. Principals would not be having meetings, and no data team days, no professional development, actual time for teachers to work and help them prepare for the 9 weeks. So we did add this. The superintendent has recommended it and supported that, which we are very excited about. Looking at this too, we did get those days approved by the State Department to make sure that it was okay that we could do that. We do have to give opportunities for individuals to comment. And also at the beginning of the session, the legislature did have some calendar legislation. I don't know where that is right now in the process, but what could happen is if they change the law, we would have to come back and take a look at our calendar and make those changes. Something else, when we look at this calendar, it's not just Berkeley County, but because James Rumsey is in our county, we do work with Jefferson and Morgan. They do have a draft copy of this. The reason for that is our spring breaks need to be the same because it's important. You know, if they're not the same, then it's really hard for transportation, and you know, the students in Morgan County would come and we wouldn't. So we work together on that as well. So they have a copy of this draft calendar as well.
I was gonna ask that question.
Yes, ma'am.
Scratch that off.
Well, let's let the public first, because that's what this is, a public hearing. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to address the school calendar issue before us? Just want to make sure that we're honoring what the law requires us. Okay,
Yes,
members of the board, if you have questions.
Just one more thing, if you all do approve it, we do send it back to the State Department and they give the final blessing on this. However, we've been in touch with them and working with this, and it's very similar to the calendar that we have this year.
And we have to, this has to go in for the budget. This is part of the budget process.
It's before that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, any members of the board? We're going to have two more hearings.
One more,
One more hearing.
yes, sir, one more.
Okay, is there anyone who wishes to make a comment from the public about the calendar? The board members, go ahead.
I had a question. So you mentioned some of the draft to Jefferson County. I think they may have already had, them. You know, if,
Actually, yes, they had their first approval before we even started the process. They do that every year, don't know why, but we do communicate. And it doesn't have to be completed actually until May. We do try to start early as well, but we're a little cautious because we never know what the legislature is gonna do. But I knew they had already had a draft presented to their board. I do know that.
do you also, do you know, so I know you mentioned spring break, do you know if theirs, that the spring break would be the same week?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Then
So they could have variations,
Yeah.
you know, in their other areas, but they did put their spring break the same time. And that's how come we have to collaborate because of Jane Durham's sake.
well, I the thing, well, another point is also parents, some parents may work here, but live in Jefferson County, vice versa.
Absolutely.
And so your kid's out of school, but you're at work, so it's,
Mhm.
and you want, how you plan a vacation when you have to work.
Correct.
Kids at school, so.
Yes.
Question. The half days, when you said delays, are those in the morning versus the afternoon?
And they're not half days. So they would, yes, they would be morning 2-hour delay. And
Okay,
the reason for that is we, I think it was last year, did the end of the school day,
Mhm.
early dismissal. But what happens because of busing and transportation and parents, the teachers really didn't get the allotted time that we thought they would.
okay,
So that's why we thought, let's make this for them and do it at the beginning of the day. So from 8 until students come at 10, that is their time to work.
okay. Only other question, and I know we get status updates on the various education bills, and I haven't read through every single bill that is up for debate, but do you know what, since we're talking about the calendar and this directly affects it, do you know what the status is of the bill that was proposed for additional professional development?
I do not, and that's the one that we're waiting on. I'm not sure if it has made it out of committee at this point. According to the information I have, I wish would.
I know.
But it would be nice. I don't think it has,
Okay,
according to my information. We get updates, but I have not seen that. Do
I
you,
haven't
do
seen
you
it
know?
on anything.
I don't think it's come out of that.
I didn't think so.
Okay.
As a-
Other question?
sorry, as a curiosity,
Okay,
as a curiosity question, I know that there are many individuals within our county who are CPR and first aid certified. The question, I guess, is do we do those on professional development days? And then if so, would the board individuals, if we so chose, wanted to sit in on those so that we could get certified? Since that seems to be something of hot topic recently. Could we do that?
I
As
would
well?
think so, but we usually do them at the beginning of the school year, those first 5 days
Okay,
that we have, because we do train all of our, we have to have individuals trained
Sure.
in CPR and first aid.
Because school systems are all doing them at about the same time, there's a big demand on that, so the classes are usually packed and there's a waiting list. And those people that are required to have it
okay,
are the ones that go first, and then anybody else that wants it.
Sure.
We're able to do that, so.
okay, okay. If there happens to be an opening, ask
Absolutely.
any of
I
us,
mean,
because
we'd
I
let you
would
know.
imagine that we would, there are a few of us that probably would want to. I think the only other question that I have is, one of the things I've heard from several teachers is that the professional development, they'd like to see some sort of improvement or rotation of that. So that they can get, maybe more up-to-date information. I'm not aware of what all is reviewed and done, so part of this is, I'm fish out of water, I'm just asking questions.
So I can share a little bit of the backdrop with you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So in the past, we used to, when we had substitutes, do a lot of our professional development during the instructional day. So we could pull a team of teachers out, train them, and then put them back in the classroom. Now we don't have that luxury because there is a lack of substitutes.
Yeah.
And we really cannot do that because it's not what's best for kids or instruction. So with these 5 professional learning days, and it's something that we always used to do, but then we got away from it. So we have really, when I say we, the Department of Teaching and Learning has worked really hard to provide meaningful staff development, not only to our teachers, but also our service personnel who deal with instruction. So the other thing that was a part of that is our data teams, which helps drive our instruction. And when you look at assessments and test scores, you know, teachers need that time to really take a good look at that. So that was part of that. Now, I will tell you, it's been pretty strict. Because we felt it needed to be when you have over, 200 permanent substitutes and, we're trying to train people. So that they're prepared to do what's best for our students. So what we're doing is we are allowing some time in that morning piece at the schools. And the principal has that priority or, can look at that and say, this hour is going to be used for you all to work in your classroom or to plan lessons or whatever you need to do.
Okay.
So we're loosening those strings a little bit. I do think we've gotten surveys back on our professional development. They've been very positive.
So they're getting better this year.
They're getting
as
better,
opposed
much
to
better.
Previous.
Yes,
Okay, great.
yes.
Okay.
One thing I think the complaint was is that, over the years, they have to do the same specific, like, every year, the same thing. And, they know it by heart, so they put it in nothing.
Oh, they're not getting the same thing.
Okay, that's why,
Okay.
we all want to make sure that they're getting different.
But it is also something we build upon, because when we're looking at student instruction, those standards that are provided by the state are really important. Not a textbook. The textbook and technology is actually a resource for what we do. So really helping them unpack the standards and understand what it is I'm supposed to be teaching and why, and then giving them time in those data teams to look at the data from the assessments and whatnot that they give to help drive that instruction. So we're building, it's a building block.
Yeah, I was referring to like bloodborne pathogens. and
Oh,
all that
those,
other
you
stuff.
mean the ones on,
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
they
hit
have
play
to
and they go out
over
on the
and
lawn and
over.
they're
go
required.
back and.
There's
That's not
required
gonna
training every
change.
year, right?
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
you're talking about.
We do
We all
still
know
have
what
to
you're
do
talking
them
about.
every year. And they are the same, sometimes
Yeah,
updated.
I was gonna say, can we update those? Is there any way we can?
One point though, often, well, let me go back to my own childhood. Sometimes he's sitting up here doing now, but I remember as a first grader in Berkeley Springs, someone got a big case of castor oil. They lined up all the kids in the school to take this dose of this stuff. And I'm thinking of some of our training. The training that we give to our employees should be tailored for the people who need it. And the people who do not need it need to have other applicable training. If you're a classroom teacher working in lesson plans, and this professional is working in some other area, you shouldn't make that person sit on that classroom teacher thing. And so I'm just making a point here, and that's one of the complaints I've heard. Some groups have needs to do things, but they're tied up doing something that's unrelated to their job. So the staff and the principals need to identify these people and let them do things to help provide better service with the children.
And you're correct. These points were well taken and we have modified it. And tried to take another look at providing who needs the most and who needs something a little different. The first one, I could see that happening, so.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Because this public hearing will be recontinued and another one at date to be announced.
In March, yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Burkett.
You're welcome.
Mr. Butts, we're on slide number 14. Well, 14, non-formula positions, are specialists included as non-formula positions?
What do you mean by specialist?
Well, I'm looking at the master list, curriculum specialists, technology integration specialist, I think they're under a step 7 or something.
We do have some, this is under step 7. So on the state's website, they have a sheet for professional service. And when you read that, it identifies which classes are, they have, so every position has a position code. And that position code is identified whether it's in formula or out of formula, or if it's step 5, 1 or 2. I can provide that to you. That document to you.
What's position code number for non-people, do you know what's up with
I would have,
Okay,
I'd have to look,
okay, let's move on.
because there's several pages of position codes throughout the whole.
Yeah, I see that.
But with this process of becoming about personnel, you know, some grades, depending on what level you are, has the specific ratios you have to meet. So we meet with every principal and go through their projected enrollment at their school by grade to determine the staffing levels. So we do meet with everybody. Every director has an opportunity to present their requested budget as well. Going through this process. The very last page is really just informational. This is stuff that's on the radar. A lot of the stuff we don't know at this time, so legislation happens. I'll try to keep it brief. From what I'm hearing across the state, the burden of insurances, it has gone up to other counties who have gotten their premium numbers, and some of them have been pretty significant. We haven't got our copiers in several years because of COVID, because we can't guarantee the equipment will actually arrive. So we will run another bid this year. It doesn't mean we'll replace it, but if we do, we expect the cost to go up because our machines are about 8 years old then, give or take. A new one for us this year is our stormwater piece. The city of Martinsburg has sent out stormwater bills. So for us, it's about 46,000 a year. And again, the rest of the stuff is just on here for information. You know, again, just to remind you, any natural step increase in the pay tables, we cover that all out of our general fund for those out of formula. Legislative changes. Again, none of that's been completed yet, but there's a potential for a governor's proposal 5% to another piece of legislation up to $9,000 for a 200-day contract. When you apply $9,000 to service personnel, 150 people over, that's a lot of money out of our general fund that we would be responsible for. So again, while we're doing this process, I think just need to be very mindful that we don't go crazy and add a bunch of positions and a bunch of programs, knowing what's coming down the road basis. So that's really all I've got at this point.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Staff for virtual school. How many are there?
I don't know specifically, I don't know off the head, we can get that for you, but they're paid out of COVID funding right now.
Yeah, but right now,
Right,
but after that, we'll be adding those positions to.
but we should be getting the student enrollment count for them as well. Yeah, they should be part of our student enrollment.
That's the one thing about the virtual program is that the number of students that we're pulling in from there, a majority of those students are not being pulled from school. They're coming from the community in places that are looking for that virtual program. So a large number of students that are in our virtual school program came from private schools, homeschool programs, and other areas to participate in the virtual school, and they add to our enrollment count. You know, so in a roundabout way, they're bringing in money to be able to fund their program. If we didn't have them, it's not like we could use those students somewhere else. They wouldn't come to Berkeley County, to school.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we are required to have a virtual program.
We are required to have a virtual program in grades 6 through 12 at this time. We have opted to have K through 12 for consistency for that program going up through there.
Is there, a number that is required for a class, to have a class? I mean, you can have 2 students, but you need an instructor. Correct?
Yes. Yes
So-
and no. We don't necessarily have to hire our own instructor here. There are instructors out there that we would pay for a student to attend their class somewhere else. And vice versa, we could have students attend some of our courses from other counties.
And you get $30. per
Correct.
student.
We would be able to charge for that, right?
So there's a cooperation cooperative effort.
I just
For
be
that.
curious how many students are in the virtual program.
I don't have that.
No, but maybe sometime.
I believe we're at about 275 was the
I thought it was
last
two
that I counted. It was,
I think
we
so.
were at or a little bit above 300. About evenly split elementary and high school. Our previous superintendent wanted to kind of keep that number there, at least until we grew the program. Which I thought was reasonable. I also think that at this time, we're gonna be approaching you soon about. If we've learned enough over the last 6 to 8 years in virtual school that we can create our own curriculum. And kind of grow that. And there is an audience of people. That are interested in the virtual program, so that we could actually have more people that could attend that.
Mr. Butts, any more further questions on this stage of the project? Thank you, sir.
I think.
We're going to be going into executive session for the superintendent's evaluation. You all be free to stretch your legs and everything. I'm gonna try to set a goal of being back here by 5 or 7, if not earlier. But we'll have to go into executive session because we have the superintendent's evaluation. And that is doing in executive session. We will have citizens forum right after the Perry Educator Award. The sign-up sheet is out in the hallway if you wish to take part of that at 7 o'clock. I need a motion to go into executive session for purpose of evaluating the superintendent.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Long, second by Ms. Power. Discussion on the motion. All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Those nay. Okay, you are now going to go into executive session. You're all free to move around. Except for this group. Thank you.
Hang some meat.
Because they don't have. No. I should have. Still do. Like especially in my.
I'd like to ask Mr. Sherman, I believe. Come forward, please. Mr. Sherman is the principal of Martinsburg High School. The floor is yours. Board members. Okay, you may begin, sir.
I thank you for the time. Mr. Stevens and Lord, I'm here to discuss an issue that I believe has been presented to you in reference to the termination of a bus driver that was involved in an incident over 2 months ago in which a student was struck. And basically, I have a lot of questions. I'm not sure, by all accounts, and I'll ask this: are any of you familiar with West Virginia Code 17C -12-7?
I'll stop here. I didn't say this in the introduction. I'll stop the clock, so your time is not being wasted in my verbiage. but the board by law is not allowed to have a conversation during citizens forum. So, I mean, you may ask your questions. We do not tell you what to say or not to say.
I understand.
Okay, I just didn't want you to expect an answer.
No, you're not expecting it.
Okay, I'll go ahead then.
Quite frankly, my whole purpose is to have the superintendent HR possibly revisit their decision before it's voted, and quite frankly, put it before the board to either approve. I think it should be disapproved, any movement he has to make towards this termination. But on that fateful morning, Code 17C-12-7 was violated by the driver of that vehicle. And that code simply reads, when the warning light is displayed, it's at that point a motorist is to bring their car, slow it down and bring it to a stop. Prior to the reds coming over. The reds mean the bus is loading and unloading. Number two, the whole scenario was set up that morning by a student missing the bus. Continued on. And then on the way back, proceeded to pick that student up. And that is the moment the incident occurred. Number one, the vehicle never slowed. Secondly, the student never looked up and never had approval of that driver to step out across the street. Every driver is trained on left side pickups. Are they a favorite thing? No. But every driver is trained to do that. I don't know of any code or any policy that states that there can be no left-hand pickups on that particular route. Now, what was happening was what we call a missed student pickup, which is clearly spelled out in the driver's handbook. I don't have one, but I'm hoping that that was looked into. No charges were filed against anything. So I'm finding, along with a multitude of people, finding difficulty in justifying the termination of a driver who for 5 years was a loyal employee, never missed a day of work, never called off, always stepped up to do extra duty.
Go ahead and finish your thought.
And had a good rapport with both parents and students that she transported. And here we are with Berkeley County short on drivers. Maybe it's the way some things are handled, is that some people want to leave and others don't want to go to come aboard. And I think it's worth some consideration. And I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Pence. Mr. Hilbert?
My name is Mandy Edwards.
Yeah.
I drive a school bus. I started driving in March of 1986. And I have been driving, that was in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. I've been here for 5.5 years. Crystal Engel and I started at the same time. We subbed for about a year before that. In Maryland, no children are allowed to cross in front of the bus. The reason why is because the law says if there is a divider in the road, the opposite side does not have to stop for any school buses. So Maryland and Arundel County made sure every student is picked up on the door side. I come here to Berkeley County. I was like a brand new driver because I had to be recertified through your state to drive the school bus. I thought, this is ridiculous, you know, I've been driving 20-some years at this time. But I'm glad they did. Because it's so different here than it was down there. And one of the things is they're allowed to cross. Because the majority of our roads here don't have dividers. So those cars that are on opposite side have to stop. We can't go out there and make them stop. We all have drivers that run our red lights at least once a day, at least. But this is what we are trained to do. They trained me how to pick up children that are on opposite side of the road. Every single one of us were trained that way. And that's what we do. And that's what Crystal Engel did. She applied her yellows. She stopped. She applied her reds by pulling the brake and opening her door. The child did not look up. She had headphones on. She was just in a hurry because she knew she was late. I have children almost every day forget to look at me, to give the okay to come across. You know, this can happen all the time, but we try our best to make them understand how this goes, how we are trained. Every single one of us trained to have children cross the front of us. I don't think what you did to Crystal Engel is right. She should not be held accountable for doing the correct thing. She did exactly like she was supposed to. The student never looked up when she was honking the horn and yelling her lungs out to stop. She was on an incline, so she didn't see the driver slowing down until it was right there. And the student still crossed. That wasn't Crystal's fault. Yes.
You can't use people's names.
I'm sorry.
You can't refer to individual names.
Oh, I've been doing it the whole time, but okay.
I didn't want
The
to.
lady over here. What that principal said about his teacher, that should be Crystal right there. I'm sorry, that should be that lady right there. They'll call from the transportation that I need somebody to go get these kids. She's the first one. I'm the last. She's the first.
Your time's up. Go ahead and make your closing statement, please.
Sir, I think you're hurting our county by not reinstating her. You really are. There's not a lot of us left. And she is one of the best. Thank you all so much for listening to me.
Yes,
No questions asked.
thank you both for your comments. We will now proceed with the consent agenda. For you have the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Knight, second by Ms. Powell. Are there any questions about?
That wasn't me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Lane. Okay, Ms. Long, are there amendments to the agenda? Consent agenda, all those discussion on the agenda? Yes, sir.
Can I speak? I didn't sign up, but just a couple minutes.
I'll
I'm
give
a
you-
fellow bus driver.
Okay, let me take care of this motion and I'll give you 2 minutes. You will have to sign up there. So come on up here and sign up and we'll grab your, right up here. Are there any comments, or questions about the consent agenda? All those in favor of the consent agenda, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have declared the motion adopted. Okay, sir, are you ready? We have Mr. Cox. 2 minutes, so.
Hi, thank you, everyone. My name is Glenn Cox. I am a school bus driver for Berkeley County. Started with the lady, 2 ladies, that the one that spoke in, the one that we're here about, talking about today. Same training course and everything. Part of the understanding of why, she was released or was given the opportunity to take another job, but was told that she can no longer drive a school bus, was possibly a change in the stop necessarily. Again, according to state law, as Larry said, or the gentleman who spoke before me said, that car should have stopped. She did everything that she did right. She turned on her flashers. She came to a stop. The flasher was on. That car did not stop. And the child got hit. Every day, just about every day, we hear over 2-way radios from the transportation department to us to say, a child has missed the bus. Is there any way you can go back to get that child? And you will hear over that radio that some drivers say, I can go grab them on the way back through. And transportation department says, okay, great, thank you. End of conversation. 99% of the times, if we're coming back through, that's going to be a left-hand pickup stop. Okay, never do we hear from the transportation department to say, okay, if you're going back through there, make sure that you turn around again to pick that student up on right-hand pickup. Because again, we are trained to pick up those kids left-hand pickup. So it's done on a regular basis. There's been, question about, well, the type of road it is. Well, I can tell you, Shiley Road is an 18-foot road.
Make your closing statement. Make your closing statement.
Again, the whole thing is with, the reason that she was fired, I feel that needs to be investigated and looked into more, regarding, her picking up the stop or, being against positive, because from what I've seen in the policy, nothing stated in there says that she did something wrong. She did not change the stop. She picked a student up that missed the bus, that just didn't get on the right side of the bus. She did not change the stop.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Okay, we're now Ms. Lopez. Mid-year academic report.
Good evening, President Murphy, Superintendent Stevens, and board members. This evening, I'm here to present the winter benchmarking report. As you can see on this first slide, I'm also indicating our benchmark windows for the year. The beginning of the year benchmark took place from August 22nd to September 30th. The middle of the year benchmark took place from January 4th to January 27th. And the end of the year benchmark will take place from May 1st to May 27th. Tonight, you're going to be looking at a comparison of the beginning of the year benchmark to the middle of the year benchmark. Next slide, please. As we do with everything, it is driven by the county strategic plan. Our mission is to provide students with multiple pathways to success, and our vision is to ensure they have limitless opportunities. Next slide, please. Our objectives for this evening, to examine the difference between formative and summative assessment, to identify the Berkeley County Schools formative assessment, to review and compare beginning of the year and to the middle of the year, student growth and achievement. And the data that we will be looking at is aligned to the goal 1 of academic excellence. All students will perform at or above grade level or make more than 1 year's progress growth in reading and mathematics. BCS will eliminate opportunity gaps and recover learning through supporting school-wide systems. Next slide, please. In terms of our first objective and looking at the difference between formative and summative assessment, if you'll take a look at the screen and look at the graphic that I have on the screen, because the data that we will be focusing on this evening is the formative assessment data. And an easy way to think about the difference between formative and summative assessment is to think about a chef preparing a meal. And when the chef is cooking the meal and occasionally doing a taste test as he's cooking and determining what ingredients he needs to add to the meal or to the soup as the screen is showing, that is when we are working in the formative assessment mindset. Because as long as the chef is in the kitchen with that soup, doing his taste test and adding ingredients, he's able to make changes. And so when we think about our formative assessment, that is what's occurring. It's allowing our teachers to do observations, to make assessments, and to make changes. When we think about the summative assessment, and we kind of look at the graphic that is up here, once the chef serves the soup to the guest, it becomes a summative assessment because no longer changes can be made. It is what it is at that point. So if we think about this and we think about our formative assessment is assessment for learning. It is the key to improving student achievement because it allows us to gauge student progress and inform instruction, and it allows teachers to make changes to the instruction to ensure all students can succeed. Next slide, please. So in terms of thinking about formative assessment, when it comes to working with the formative assessment, there are key questions for teachers and students to ask themselves. Teachers are working through these questions when they are planning and prepping and preparing for instruction. They're asking, where am I going? Where am I now? Where to next? And so these are key questions that guides their work that they're doing to ensure that they're planning the most effective lessons for their students. But when we ask our students to use these questions, we're asking them, or we're asking them to actually inform themselves about their current progress in order to help them set goals and look at what they need to do to improve. Next slide, please. With Berkeley County Schools formative assessments, we have scholastic reading measures at grades 1 through 5, and we have next step guided reading grades K through 5. These two assessments came with our adopted series, our scholastic literacy. The next is STAR Math grades 1 through 5, and it has probably been our most consistently used formative assessment over the years. Our next is the IXL, and that is administered at grades 6 through 12. And we look at EL, English Language Arts and Mathematics. And then at the high school level, we have the PSAT 8-9 for grade 9, and the PSAT and an SQT for grades 10 and 11. Next slide, please. Just to sort of help you understand some of the terminology or the acronyms, because in education, we are riddled with acronyms. So just as we look through this, when you see BOY, we're referring to beginning of the year. MOY, we're referring to middle of the year. GRL is referring to guided reading level. We also sort of refer to that in terms of instructional reading level for our students. ELA is English Language Arts. ERW is associated with the PSAT, that stands for Evidence-Based Reading and Writing. PSAT is the Preliminary Scholastic Aptitude Test. MSQT is National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. And usually those are combined as PSAT and MSQT, but for the slides, on the slide, I separated the two. Lexile, you're looking at text complexity, and I'll get into that a little bit more in detail when we're looking at the assessments. And then we talk about independent reading level and instructional reading level. Next slide, please. The first slide the first couple of slides that we're going to look at is the scholastic literacy. Now, I'm going to preface this before we go into really looking at the data. Is at this point, the window ended on January 27th. So we had a couple of schools that request extensions. So you are looking at the data for the scholastic literacy. We're about 82% complete in terms of the data and the way it's being reflected this evening. If you look at the incidents in charge, you can see by grade level, the number of students that we have rostered for the district, the students with middle of the year guided reading level, and then the percent with guided reading level. So that if you look at the very bottom across the totals, you can see that we are about 82% complete at this point in time. When we look at this, you can see that in terms of completion, second grade has the most complete with 92%. And when you look at their change in terms of the percent meeting or exceeding the benchmark at second grade, in the fall, we had 52% of the students meeting or exceeding the benchmark. And at the middle of the year, we have 59% of the students meeting or exceeding the benchmark. Third grade is our completed grade at this point. But they right now are showing a significant change from 52% at the beginning of the year to 63% at mid-year. Hopefully, when everything is completed, those numbers will stay as strong as what they're appearing. But when you look at our chart overall in terms of the next steps guided reading assessment, you can see that we have made gains across all grade levels. And in terms of when you're looking at this data with the next steps guided reading assessment, there are 4 assessments that make up the data. We have the reading survey. We have a diagnostic spelling test. We also have a comprehension test. Those 3 assessments are done whole class. But then the significant portion of this test is what they refer to as the reading conference, where the teachers are doing individual running records with the students. So the data that is reflected here is from that 4th piece, which is the most significant piece and carries significant weight. The next slide, please. With the next slide, this is the scholastic reading measures. And when you're looking at the scholastic reading measures, you're looking at Lexile points. And in education, there are, we look at Lexile bands. There are grade level bands from K through, I think, high school with the bands. And when you're looking at that and you're trying to make sense of this data, we are looking at student growth with scholastic reading measures. And so if you look at this chart, and if you think about where we are at mid-year, we are halfway at the halfway point. Scholastic reading measures, you're looking at 1 year's growth. 100 points equals 1 year's growth. So at the midpoint, we're looking to see students making at least 50-point gain. So if you look across and you look at the first line, that's the 50 to the 99-point gain in Lexile points. And then in first grade, those are number of students. Those are not percentages. We're looking at number of students. So in grade 1, we have 51 students. Grade 2, 158. Grade 3, 244. Grade 4, 293. Grade 5, 255. So just in that row and looking at that row across, you're looking at those students on track to make at least a year's growth because they have met 50 points or more. And as you look through the chart, you can then see that we have students that are exceeding that. So if you go down below and we look at the percent of students with gains greater than 49 points, and we look at our total, right now in the district, 42% of our students are on track to make at least a year's growth or greater. So that is what this data is representing. Next slide, please. This shows our STAR data. At the beginning of the year, we were at 36% proficient. Mid-year, we're at 38% proficient. And then you can see the percent that are at or above the benchmark. Overall, in terms of the district, we've had a 2 percentage point gain from beginning of the year to middle of the year. And we are making slight gains from first, second, third, and fifth. We have a slight decrease at the middle of the year for 4th grade. Next slide, please. All right, the data that we're looking at now is the IXL data, where we're moving into the secondary realm of things. And so we are looking at the growth that has occurred in 6th through 12th grade. And once again, with IXL, very similar to the Scholastic reading measures, you're looking at 10 points. So for 10 points equals 1 month growth. So once again, you're kind of on that 100-point scale you are with the Scholastic reading measures. So when you look at this and look at our average growth in 6th grade, it's about 6.5 months. 7th and 8th grade are very comparable at about 3.5 months. 9th grade at 2.8 months. 10th grade at 3.4, 11th at 3.1, and then we're less than 1 month growth at 12th grade. And that is our picture for math. If we move next, this slide reflects then the same picture, only we're looking at our ELA growth for the district. And once again, you can see that in terms of really spotlights, 6th grade has done some really phenomenal work since beginning of the year to middle of the year. And they're also 9th grade is slightly behind, but they have made good growth as well. Next slide. The next slides, we're looking at the PSAT data. We don't have a comparison because we do it in the fall, and then we will then administer it again in the spring. So this is baseline data that you're looking at for grade 9, and they took this assessment in October. And then you can see in terms of then the district compared to the state, to the national and international performance. This is, and then on the left-hand side, if you look at the very top part of the chart, it is showing that 46% of our students met the English, the ERW benchmark, the evidence-based reading and writing benchmark at 410. 46% of our students met that benchmark. And then the math benchmark is 450. 16% of our students met that benchmark at grade 9. Next slide, please. This is the PSAT and MSQT. I broke it apart so that you can see grade 10 scores. And once again, it is set up similar to what you saw for grade 9. And you can see how we compare to the state and the national and international. At grade 10, we have 39% of our students meeting the benchmark in evidence-based reading and writing. And in math, we have 15% of our students meeting the benchmark at grade 10. Next slide, please. Grade 11. Once again, you see the comparison to the district, to the state, to the national and international. At grade 11, we have 44% of our students meeting the benchmark. And we have 12% of our students meeting the benchmark in math. Next slide, please. Our focus this year as the county has been on rigorous instruction and increasing rigor, data teams, and co-teaching. The data teams is sort of the engine that drives the work, because the discussions and the collaboration in terms of what we're doing with co-teaching and with increasing rigor is sort of driven through the conversations and the collaborations with our teachers and the data team. But as a district, we've also placed emphasis and really have focused our professional learning on our PL days and our CE days around the alignment of our instruction, curriculum, and assessment. So with that alignment, and really delving into our standards and working with our teachers with the standards and unpacking our standards to help our teachers really determine, at what level of rigor do we need to be teaching our standards. So we're trying to have that seamless alignment between the curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And it starts with working with our teachers and helping them to really deeply understand our standards. Any questions?
First, I want to thank you, because I know you have some challenges outside of the school.
Thank
you. Appreciate you coming in to meet us. Questions by the board?
I just got a couple, and we're not critical. I mean, I'm not trying to be critical. So.
Okay.
Does every school use STAR now?
All the elementary, yes. Last year we had a small pilot program going on with six schools. And then we now are all back to using STAR, and so K-5, we are all being assessed by STAR.
But that's much better than having a couple, using something else.
It is, because it gives us the consistency, and we're not comparing apples to oranges. It allows us to compare apples to apples. We were very excited about the pilot program that we had, and we did like the data that we received from it. However, they had some platform issues, and they were unable to resolve those platform issues. So we made the decision to go back to STAR for everyone.
And I just have one more, and this is just me trying to understand.
Okay.
Is there a concern, like for the IXL, math and grade 64, concern about, just the very little growth in, 12th grade? Or is that expected?
I think it's more of a usage issue than a growth issue. And I think that what you would find from the high school principals, I think there's good usage at grades 9 and 10, but I think when they move to grades 11 and 12, there's more emphasis being placed on the PSAT, SAT, and what they refer to as that SAT suite, which includes those assessments. And they do more work through there with Khan Academy. So I think it's more of a usage issue that we're looking at.
You know, I think they did say that in the LSIC presentation.
They did, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
And the only thing I wanted to just kind of reiterate for clarity for those who are watching and the parents that have concerns when they see the PSAT scores. We test 81%, I believe, is what you had said to us. And not every county does that.
Correct.
So when we are looking at that from a county to county basis, we're going to have students that perform well, and then there are students that are not performing well. And then if you've got that mixture, it pulls down the average. Versus another county where if you've got a allotment of students that are using it in order to get to that college level,
The one
there,
thing,
it's gonna be different, it's gonna be elevated, so I don't want parents to sit there and think that there's an issue specifically with curriculum or excellence in that regard. We need to be able to measure this correctly and look at it correctly. Do I have that understanding correct?
you do have that understanding
Okay,
correctly,
great.
and for us, the decision was made because when you look at the PSAT 8-9, and you look at the PSAT and MSQT for grades 10 and 11, it's part of that suite, and it really is a predictor and a preparation for SAT school day, which is currently our state summative assessment. And so in terms of, you know, if we were trying to really compare ourselves to someone else in this state, it would be the districts that are, if they would be willing to share their data for us to see. Like right now, I know that Cabell County has been using like following the same path that we do. They do fall and spring in comparison. So it would be a matter of us maybe collaborating with Cabell so that we can compare our data to their data to give a truer picture in terms of what you're asking.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would love to see is where the 9th graders were last year compared to what their scores are for this year in 10th grade. What does that growth look like? Because I'm assuming there is growth to some capacity to, you know, as much as we can.
So let me ask this back to you to make sure I get what you're asking.
Absolutely.
So you're asking like last year 9th grade cohort to
Yes.
this year's 10th grade cohort. I can put that together for you.
Yeah, that's something I would love to be able to see to actually, I think that would give us a more accurate picture as to the growth and what we need to see, just for comparison purposes. Because I would hate to say 9th grade this year is the same as 9th grade next year. I mean, that's kind of, but that's not accurate. It's
Well,
different individuals.
When you kind of look at it that way, when you're looking at it like this year's 9th grade to last year's 9th grade, and when you're looking at it grade wise, you're looking at it more comparing instructionally. Okay, where are we breaking down from an instructional standpoint?
Sure.
When you're looking at it from like what you're asking for, kind of that diagonal or vertical alignment from student from cohort to cohort, then you're looking at that student versus teaching.
And I think I'd love to see how that works, because if we remember back when, and not that you need any help remembering back with COVID-19, you have kindergartners that have never experienced this year COVID-19 versus those who are in, you know, second grade. They had a complete disorienting, not as, for lack of a better word, consistent,
Well,
you know, school day versus what our kindergartners have now.
one thing our academic coaches are finding, and also too, with like one of the assessments that make up the Next Step Guided Reading Assessment, I said diagnostic spelling test, but it's actually development of word knowledge, same test, different program. But basically, you're looking at the phonetic principles that students know and are able to do, and we're finding this year's third graders have a weakness in terms of the phonics
Okay.
because of where they were with COVID.
Right.
And we also know that in third grade, that's sort of the last year where we really do heavy phonics work. When we go into fourth and fifth grade, we do more word study. So if we don't really get the phonics now, you know, it can be lost on them. So it's a matter of how do we not lose them and keep them
Gotcha.
where they need to be. So that's kind of what you're, I think, referring to.
Yeah, that is what I'm referring back to, is, you know, what was potentially lost and how are we gaining back?
Well,
Gaining
I
and
think the
then,
data should, you know, we can still see that there are some gaps that we are still continuing to grow. And when we're looking at the growth aspect of it versus the proficiency, the growth allows us to see how we are closing the gaps.
yeah, and that's what I was kind of hoping to help others see by the questions and stuff that I was asking, so, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Martin or Mr. Wright?
I did have a question on the chart. The part that says strength and skills, I'm just assuming that's saying that that percentage of students need to have. strength and
Yes,
skills.
and you're referring to the PSAT
Yes.
chart. The yellow is the approaching, that means that, you know, they're kind of middle of the road. But then the red is the strengthening, those are the percent where we need to place emphasis and do our differentiated instruction. And to really then, you know, provide intervention.
Just one question, I think it's this scholastic reading, that it is 42% are on track.
To make 1 year's.
Okay,
1 year, the 42% of the students are on track, because of what that is saying, that 42% of the students have gained, you know, 49 points or greater
to meet 100.
to meet 100, yes.
Okay.
So if you think we're at the midway, you know, that we should have, this student should have 50 points. If you're thinking in terms of we're at mid-year, they, you know, at our midpoint, they should have gained 50 points. By the end of the year, they should gain 100 points. So it's like 10 points a month. And so they're on, so 42% of our students are on track to make at least 1 year's worth of growth.
Do you think that's lower? Is that lower than normal?
I don't necessarily, I'd have to go back and look last year where we were at this time. I feel in terms of when you think about it, you know, you're looking at first grade and you're comparing all grades from first to fifth. And when you look at where they are as readers in first grade, you still have a lot of students that are non-readers. And so when you're looking at that total points gained and looking at from first to fifth, the picture of the reader changes drastically. So I think it's very solid. I would have to go back to see where we were last year, but I think that it leaves the door open to say we do have work to be done. So, but you know, I would like to see, you know, at least 50%. But once again, also keep in mind, we still have data out. There's data that's still not completed, so that could change. And so I'm going to, my glass is going to be half full tonight, and I'm going to think that it's going to change for the better.
Is this the second year, right, with Scholastic?
This is our second year with
Yeah.
Scholastic, yes.
So like teachers are still learning with,
Teachers
Curriculum.
are still learning the assessments. And now with the Scholastic reading measure, it's one that is computer-based, so it's done online. So there's probably more opportunity for error in the Next Steps Guided Reading Assessment. And because those are teacher administered, teacher scored, but we are continuously doing professional development and to work with our teachers to help them to gain the knowledge, to help them to be successful with the administration of those assessments.
Greg, do you have any question?
Michael took my question.
No.
Sorry.
We visited school district at the last meeting. And I noticed that the IXL compared to the summative assessment. We were, I'm not gonna start naming schools, but. We found out that when you look at the IXL scores, if you let the kids kind of start at their own level, you know, say they start down here. And then they progress up to here, they show a big gain. But one of the high schools had a very small IXL gain, but they had a very high summative assessment gain, if I'm recalling right. And-
But once again, think about this, Mr. Murphy, when you're doing that comparison, you're once again kind of apples to oranges, because with the summative assessment, it is the PSAT, so it would be more aligned to looking to the how they were performing on the PSAT and MSPP at grade 11, because that's what we use as our benchmark in our two data points for comparison. We do the PSAT grade 11 in the fall. And then when we want to make a comparison for the summative assessment, we then look at the SAT school day. So those are the two pieces in terms of assessment that we use to make comparison for summative. But once again, that's not to take away from the IXL, because the IXL really should be informing the instruction and guiding the instruction and making those instructional changes.
Yes, that was one of the points I think one of the staff brought up, was that if the school is placing the student in a proper place where they really are functioning, and then growing from that point, the growth is not as great in IXL. But the learning that they're being pushed to helps them over on the other tests.
My understanding with IXL, when we do the diagnostic test, the test itself, that's where the student enters at in terms of to getting their baseline. So it's not necessarily the school, but it's the platform itself assesses and places the students where they're entering at. And so then a diagnostic plan is almost it's very individualized. So each student will receive their own individualized instructional plan that they will work on. And then it's about meeting a specific goal. And then what happens, if, like from the beginning of the year benchmark to the middle of the year benchmark to the end of the year benchmark, there should be less questions on those benchmark assessments, because as the students are becoming more proficient, less questions will be given to those students at mid-year. The more proficient they become, the less assessing will be taking place, or they'll have less number of questions to answer as they become more proficient.
Okay, well, one thing that would be helpful is in our LSRC books, we just have, I guess, the beginning of the year testing.
Yes.
On the.
That's all we had at the time.
So what might be helpful is a follow-up supplement course to look at third quarter or fourth quarter there. It seems to me like you on your scholastic literacy and your math comparison, you can measure how much losses are occurring over the summer. Am I right?
You can. I think because I didn't have the data for you, because like I said, really and truly the scholastic literacy, our window just ended on the 27th.
Yeah.
The computer-based tests, the data comes in much quicker, but with the next steps guided reading assessment, it takes a little bit more time. So that's why we were a little bit pushed. And I think even in trying to prepare some of this stuff for Mr. Stevens, superintendent's evaluation, what I tried to do there, and I don't necessarily know if I hit the target, but what I tried to do is I tried to take for the scholastic reading to give you a comparison. I tried to take the end of the year benchmark in the reading. So I tried to do a cohort. So kind of like what we were talking about, 9th grade to 10th grade. I went back to the data and I looked at, okay, if they were first graders at the end of the year, they're second graders now. And I tried to put together a chart of a cohort for you to kind of have a comparison. But yes, we could look at learning loss and do exactly as you're saying. We could make that comparison, because, you know, now that, you know, we're gaining and we're staying consistent with our assessments, it's easier to have that historical data and to look at data that way.
Looks like in the one grade, they're actually having learning loss during the school year. But I mean, it's not funny, but
No.
I saw that.
But Ms. Murphy, here's the thing, when you see that, the question that we ask is why? And so then, it's about then drilling down and finding our root cause and trying to find the answer to that why, and then coming up with an action plan in terms of what we need to do next. To have course correction and to then see what is it, an instructional, is it a professional learning, are we lacking, where is the breakdown? And so it's our job in terms of when we look at this data, it's not about just looking at the numbers. It's thinking about those numbers are students and what do we need to do to meet the needs of those students so that they all can be successful. And then also too, what do our teachers need to be successful? And what type of professional learning do they need? And our goal this year was to really focus on the standards. And to really help, use them with the unpacking of the standards to help them really plan and prep so that they're teaching the standard at the right level of rigor. Because that's very important in terms of being able to ensure that we're hitting our mark, hitting our target with our students.
And also their expectations.
Yes,
One of the things that you're measuring here is growth in a year.
yes,
But it's not grade level mastery that we're checking here. It's just, if they're a fifth grader, I'm always taking them fifth and
Right.
working on the third grade level. And they perform up to a fourth grade level by the end of the year, but they're going on to the sixth grade.
and honestly, Mr. Murphy, we're really hoping with those students that are that far behind, that they're making more than a year's growth. But the goal is, especially coming out of the pandemic, is to close the gap. And by using these formative assessments, by really looking to see where the breakdown is, and then planning and prepping and providing intervention to attempt to close the gap. And so, yes, students are behind, as you said, within the example that you gave. But within the example that you gave, we're always looking that they are making more than a year's growth. So that is the goal. So even though, we're looking at it, and if you go back to that chart with all the numbers and you go down, you can see that there are a significant number of students in all grades that are already at a year to almost a year and a half growth. And you go down to the next line and you will see that there are students that are at a year and a half to 2 years growth. So you can see that there are students that are moving well beyond just a year's growth.
Well, and
But we also look at proficiency, when we're looking at the next steps guided reading, we are looking at, did they meet or exceed the benchmark?
And with the proposed legislation, we could still be using this model. But if they give us aids in the classroom, if we find them, it could be maybe a different thing. Any other questions? Thank you. Once again, we appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank
you, Rob. You're welcome.
Okay, monitoring item, bond project status.
Ready? Okay. Question was, we're at the point where we're discussing bond project status. And I just wanted to have this as a recurring item on here, so if we had something to come up that I could talk to you about it. And I just wanted to let you know that we're looking at continually meeting with that work team on working on the bond status and getting things approved by the Attorney General's office. We have a meeting tomorrow morning to check the status of that. On Wednesday, tomorrow morning is it tomorrow morning or afternoon? Let me double check that. I might have misspoken. That is tomorrow. Actually, it's tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow afternoon at 1:15. Yeah, tomorrow afternoon 1:15. And then on Wednesday, we're really going to get an opportunity to meet some of the players that are in that. So I want to be able to set that up and bring them in. So Really, that's all we have right now. It's kind of a hurry up and wait. You know, there's gonna come a time where all of a sudden, boom, we're gonna be going crazy, but, right now. Just, hoping to get things pushed through and hear back from the Attorney General's office. Yeah, meet the people that are gonna be working with us, a good bit on Wednesday night. And our Wednesday afternoon, and then, you know, hoping to get some of these projects started.
Okay, any questions for the superintendent about the bond progress? All right, we're going to move on. You have the law about 18A5-1A. After we had our discussion with Dr. Branch at the last meeting, it was, I suggest you review your minutes. I know you have, but I'll pull that section out where we're discussing some of the transitional school issues and classroom issues. Remind you that the board does have a responsibility on this one. And when I ask an update on the study that we're talking about alternative school, but I also think they have some other committees working. I found out that we probably should at least know about and find out about the alternative school. But I thought there was feelings last meeting about the profanity being used in the schools. Some of the problems, and we need to talk to the employees perhaps, I don't know, but I just want to keep this subject breathing and our attention on it about the discipline and the responsibility this board has. And we're only going to take a few minutes here to discuss and let Ms. Burkhardt talk about her committee and find out the other committees that are going on.
The only thing I was gonna say to that, Mr. Murphy, is that I think that there could be potentially some clarity that comes out with the principal survey. I know that that's something that we're gonna discuss in a little bit. But I think that that's a possibility, because there were a couple of questions if, we remember back when, Ms. Long and I reviewed it with everybody, that there were a couple of questions on there regarding discipline. So maybe we can get some information from that might be able to be utilized in reviewing of the discipline policy and such.
Okay. Would you like to give us a brief update? How many, well, Mr. Steve, you and I were talking Wednesday, and we were discussing, it sounds like you have more than one committee discuss it.
What were we discussing? Talk to me.
Talking about the discipline issues, county, aside from the alternative school, do you have another committee looking at the policy in that?
No.
Okay,
No, we have the committee that Ms. Burkhardt was referring to. Now, we have a topic that comes up when we meet in the advisory groups. So there are other discussions that take place. There's not a specific committee about it.
Okay, that was my misunderstanding. Burkhardt, would you mind giving us a few moments of update on that?
Sure.
We were talking about it earlier, not still about.
Yeah, that's fine. So actually, we started looking at this last year, and it didn't transpire. So we had a group of principals that were interested in bringing it back, and we started meeting, and we meet every month. And we have come up with an alternative plan called a Behavior Academy. And we have established, it would be a small program starting out. We have looked at other counties in the state that have used similar programs. They have some different dynamics because they have different support. Like there's one in Morgantown, and the university provides a lot of support for the program. So we don't have that. So we're looking at housing a program at a school for K-5 students, and we would split K1 and 2 in one classroom, 3, 4, and 5 in another. Have 10 to 12 students in a classroom. a very, specific intervention process before students would get into that program. Which would involve a lot of paperwork and involve maybe the student assistant team. And then this program would be temporary, depending on the student. We're looking at possibly, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it might be. And our goal would be to get those students back into the general ed classroom with transitional support from the guidance counselor of the school, the principal of the homeschool, and also the social worker who would be a part of that program. So that is the goal of the program. If we would have students that we are not successful with and they are not making achievement, then they possibly may be referred to SAT for special education services. But our goal is to intervene and support these students and provide them the interventions they need and the teachers support to get them back in the regular ed classroom. That is the goal of the program. And right now it's small scale. We have talked to transportation, and they are supportive of it and can make that happen. We have reached out to all the different resources that we can. The Martinsburg Initiative has agreed to provide a social worker for that program, which Berkeley County would not have to pay for. And we're still working out the logistics of the program. We want really good certified people for that. We're looking at the program to be a 4-day program, which is kind of appealing. We're trying to make it appealing, but we also want the best staff we can get in there to support the program. Looking at 2 classroom teachers and 4 aides, 2 that would be in the classrooms, but 1 that would rotate. And I think what happens lots of times in programs like this, it's very easy to burn out. And when I say aides, we want those aides to be trained as RBTs because then they would have that specialty in behaviors. So there's a lot that we're looking at. We have a budget that we put together for that. Just depending on what direction it goes, we could probably streamline a little bit. We're also looking at possibly the administrator of the building would have to really also be the administrator of this program in order for it to be successful, because that's just an important part of it, we feel. And possibly offering some kind of supplemental pay for that as well, which is part of the budget. So we have a great plan put together. I know that they're going to be submitting their budget, the budget that has been created. We will look at that budget and then talk, highly support it during the budget process. So that's where we are.
You're on the right track there, Marie.
Great overview.
I had a brief question. So
Okay.
part of are you also looking at whether the students are acting out due to the fact that they're actually they're struggling in the classroom, basically? A lot of students that I've talked to and I've seen over the years, a lot of students that act out is because they can't keep up.
Sure.
Or they're behind, and so let me act out so I can get out of this. Because I don't want everybody teasing me because now I'm dumb, even though,
Right, and we're certainly looking at the academic piece of that, which we always do. And we will meet those students where they are in this program. But the focus is, it's instructional, but we're really focusing on behavior so we can get the students back into the regular classroom.
To Mr. Wright's point, is in this process an evaluation done for any learning disabilities that could be there, whether it's dyslexia or anything that we might not necessarily have seen before or previously? I'm thinking of those kids that maybe have like ADHD and their attention's all over the place. They need 5 minutes to, get it out.
Absolutely, and I think in any academic program that we look at, we are always looking at those individual differences that students may or may not have. And that process will be followed just as it is now.
Okay.
But yeah, it may bring out a whole different ideology of the student that we didn't know because they're in a smaller group and we have really good involved staff that understand the behaviors and how to support them.
Yeah, the only reason why I'm thinking of it is because when I was a kid, again, the understanding of what ADHD was back then is completely different than what it is now.
Yes.
And I was labeled as a special ed kid who would not get very far. Fast forward years later, that's obviously not true, but I don't want that, not that we do that, but I don't want that, you know, something that we could catch, whether it's ADHD or something else, to slip and fall through the cracks. Just because they might not necessarily exhibit the classic symptoms of that have been grouped together by the American Psychological Association. That's my only.
Sure, absolutely
my only
understood, and,
assumption.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay,
That is.
I'm just, it makes me feel better to say it
Sure.
sometimes than to,
Absolutely.
you know, than to not. So that was my own.
So we're looking at the whole child.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
looking at the whole child
Great,
in this process, and if they become a part of that program.
great.
And still looking at the whole child if they're transitioned back or wherever they may,
Yeah.
whatever, you know, road they may take. So,
Because you
absolutely.
said the SAC team would be involved too,
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
could possibly be involved, yes.
especially what she's referring to.
Yes. We also have talked to Pat Patton from Project Aware.
Okay.
He would be working with families as well with the small group of students that we have. So a lot of resources that we have to pull in to really look at the whole picture to help these children be successful.
Awesome.
Yeah, the visual screening, audio, hearing things, the trailer over here where we have that service that advocates for families, I guess it's what you call it.
The PERK program?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Really be an intensive, instead of them going, searching us out, which perhaps you know. We'll try to infuse them with what's available to their families as well as the child.
Yeah.
Okay, I saw Dr. Branch back there. Did you have something you wanted to follow from last week's discussion?
No, I had mentioned, before the meeting that there was some data that was asked of me, and I have part of that. The demographics piece for students who are at transitional school is a little more difficult for us to mitigate right now, and I spoke to Darius Albright in our technology department, and there are some pieces that we may have to do manually for that, so he's gonna try and run the numbers the best that he can, you know, for demographic data for our transitional school students, and then we'll just have to go through every referral manually and kind of do some deciphering on some of that other stuff, but I will have that to you shortly.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
For being able to add loop there and informs you great. Ms. Long, action on principal survey.
Well,
I think you skipped one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
the virtual school.
Oh, virtual. Yes, I did. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't need, you can sit patient all evening there.
Oh, you're fine. Good evening, President Murphy, board members, and Mr. Stevens. My name is Holly Branch, and a couple years ago, I was brought on board to kind of figure out the virtual program in Berkeley County, and it fits into our vision and mission of multiple pathways to success. So this is a very small demographic of Berkeley County, but it does definitely provide one of the pathways. And I do think honestly that it's a pathway of the future. If you think about colleges having virtual programs, and of course, COVID, changed the idea of, virtual in school, but also in the workplace. And so, I've done a lot of research since I was brought on board in 2020. And just so you're aware, legislatively, counties are required to have a virtual program in grades 6 through 12. Berkeley County has chosen since the pandemic to have it for grades K through 12. And there's several reasons for that. We have a team of 6 full-time people and 40 adjunct teachers in the Berkeley County virtual program. And all of those are Berkeley County teachers, and that's something that has really been one of the goals for us, is to be a Berkeley County program. So, you know, in the last 20 years that this has actually been around in West Virginia, it's been a West Virginia program. And the pandemic did change that a good bit, where the state did ask counties to take care of their own virtual pathways last year. So, you know, whenever I came on board, I started immediately trying to research and find out what the best approach is for curriculum and supporting students in this virtual pathway, with students and with curriculum, with faculty and curriculum. And the first year we used West Virginia Learns, and that is a program that is used in the state of West Virginia. And after that, when we looked at curriculum last year, I don't know if you guys remember this last year, but I came to you and asked for Stride for our grades K through 5. And it has been a wonderful program. The teachers have enjoyed the program, and the families have found it to be useful. But one of the goals since what I was brought on in 2020 was to, you know, be more independent as a virtual provider for our students and not have to use outside vendors to provide the curriculum. We wanted Berkeley County teachers teaching Berkeley County students with Berkeley County curriculum. So that is where we're at. I have been working with Kanawha County schools. They have a virtual program, and they're a county similar in size to us. And they have written their own curriculum, and they started doing that a couple years ago. And they've kind of been coaching us along with that process. So this year, in our discussions with them, we're going to start writing our own curriculum, and then the conversation evolved to purchasing theirs. So they have written their curriculum for grades K through 12, and it's independent, and it's all of theirs, and they're willing to give us that, sell us that. And we can use that and do that with that what we want. So basically that means, and the reason I'm excited about that is because that process took them 3 years, and then they're providing us information that they have gone through. We've looked at it. It's been vetted. They've had significant training on it. And we've talked to them extensively about it. I've gone to trainings on writing virtual curriculum, and we're pretty pleased with the content, and we think this is the right way to go, because as we move forward, once we purchase it, we're going to be able to do what we feel like we need to do as Berkeley County to make it independent or change it. So we are allowed to do that with yearly maintenance, and then future development. We continue to, just like you buy new textbooks or teachers from one year to the next change their instruction, we want to be able to keep that door open to make sure we're keeping the curriculum fresh and relevant for students. So what I'm asking for is for you guys to consider allowing us to purchase Kanawha County's curriculum, which we will pay $339,000 for, and that is comparable to what we would pay if we were writing our own over a 3-year period. And so basically they're not trying to make money off of us. They're just want to be reimbursed for what it would cost, and that's how much it would cost us to do it ourselves as well. And so, and then I have factored in, you know, for each year after that, $20,000 for yearly maintenance. We'd like to look at about 10 classes a year to revamp and see if we need to make any changes, and it has asked teachers to analyze that and update that, and then produce possible future courses. So I project 20,000 and then up to 30,000, just in case we want to, you know, inflation or prices, or basically want to do a couple more things. So I kind of overestimated on those last couple years. So if we continue on the path that we're on, and we continue to use Stride and West Virginia Learns that we're using now, that's going to cost us, this is all based on about 300 students. And that's about how many students we had this year. And I anticipate every bit of that next year with students once we start to open up enrollment, which we're hoping to do that on March 1st. And we would have to continue that relationship with Stride and West Virginia Learns, which would be around $186,000 a year. So after a total of 5 years, you can see there's about a $500,000 difference in our favor. So we are front loading and paying a good bit at the beginning, but once it's ours to change and maintain and develop. And in the long run, I do believe it is the proper investment.
Question for the board?
Why would it cost us so much money to develop our own curriculum?
That's based on paying them, so we would train the teachers, we would hire teachers to write the curriculum, and they would write an entire course for an entire year. And it's anywhere from $2,800 to $3,300 a course to write it, and there's about 90 some courses.
I know that the state gave us money for the virtual schools with COVID funds. Not the state, the federal government, or maybe it came through the state, correct? So, but then we will not, that's gonna end, so we'll be paying for that ourselves from now on.
And that's the reason that we're wanting to move to the cheaper. You know, not just cheaper, but it's a version that would be more catered to Berkeley County school students.
And we have 330 students, that's what you said?
We started the year with a little over 300 students, and we're settled in, and then October 1, we had 267. And then at the semester with transferring in and out, we're right around 202.
Oh, wow. So, how many teachers?
There are 4 lead teachers and 36 adjunct teachers.
We pay them hourly?
We pay them by student, so we use the same model as the state does for West Virginia Learns. And we pay them per student at the end of each semester.
Go ahead, anybody else?
I've got a question. So can we use some of the COVID funds to pay for virtual?
Yes.
Okay, so that you're coming up with general.
Yeah, I think that's the plan, and I think that's also, in talking to, Mr. Stevens and Dr. Harper and Kanawha County, they think this is the time to do that, to use that ESSER money to be able to do that. And, one other thing I want to mention too, the reason I get excited as a teacher about this possibility is that Berkeley County teachers are going to match it to curriculum maps. We want to restructure it to be designed on a weekly basis so that, it's easier for students and families and teachers to know what week they should be on. So we're excited about that possibility and being able to share that with the county. Yes, virtual school is using it, but we've already talked to Homebound, and Homebound is interested in possibly using that curriculum as well. And I think really the sky's the limit with being able to use that curriculum that Berkeley County would
So another question, so. That's this one on my head. Oh, yes, so I know right now we're going basically K through 12. If we were to switch back to what it was before, 6 to 12. I guess, would it be more savings that way, or what kind of issues would that bring up?
I think that the grades tend to be proportional. So, around the same percent of people in every grade. So we don't have really a dominating grade level. So it is K through 12. And the thing that I've kind of noticed is with the K through 5, we have quite, that tends to be families where the family wants to be more involved in the process. It's kind of like they get to homeschool, but they get the support of the teachers and the curriculum and the county and their confidence, West Virginia standards. So I think that's a piece that I think that's important, that I think the people that are in there in K-5 are really looking for this to be a long-term pathway for their families. So.
Those would be students that we would not have on our enrollment. So those are students that come in and we garner enough money from them being in our enrollment. That it pays for their involvement in virtual school. was one of those, if they went away, the virtual school would go away, it doesn't add money anywhere else. That makes sense to you.
It could be, come back in the school system.
They could, but as I said, this is a clientele that mainly is coming from the homeschool environment or private school. That's where they're coming from.
Just have one other question. The virtual instructors, a lot of them are from this area, or are they now?
They are from here, yeah, they are. So, the first year in 2020, they were from all over the state.
Yeah, that's what I.
Yes, but now it's Berkeley County teachers,
Okay,
and
that's
only
good.
a few here and there that we use the state if it's just like French 3, we don't have a French 3
Mhm.
teacher, so.
Okay, that's good. That makes sense.
Mr. Martin, Mr. Tom?
From someone who does, you know, one of the things that I looked for when I was homeschooling my kids was to make sure that they had the standards, the federal standards, and had accreditation. This is prior to me even knowing that there was a virtual school for Berkeley County, so in doing that, I tried to make sure of certain things, and I am appreciative of the fact that there is not just the cost savings, but there is the ability to tailor it to the curriculum apps, and to what we as a county and you know, in our state is doing. So I'm appreciative of that.
Mr. Morgan?
Is Stride, the main, like, how much does West Virginia Learn versus Stride?
Stride is the majority of that. West Virginia Learns is pretty inexpensive.
Okay.
And they have a considerable amount of COVID money as well, that they've been giving some major discount levels. But that, you know, they haven't told me what next year is gonna cost, but it's significantly less than Stride.
Oh, that's a lot for 300 students.
Right, yeah.
That's every single year.
Yeah, Stride is the one you see commercials for K-12, if you ever see them on TV.
Actually, she's got that leveled out at 186 across through there, but I anticipate the West Virginia Learns. Especially going up when the COVID money runs out for the state. You know, just, they were able to pass along some savings to the schools during, you know, with the COVID.
From the time I started, West Virginia Learns went from $1,200 a student to $600 a student to $200 a student. So they keep reducing, but I think it's related to COVID money that they're.
It is COVID.
Yeah,
So
and it's,
then I'll go back up to where.
oh.
Well,
I think it's
the
gonna
bottom
go
number
back.
down here is a very low estimate that she has provided, because a small portion of that is proportionally as West Virginia Learns. And what we're saying is, when the COVID money disappears in 2024, we believe, they haven't said this to us yet, but we believe that number of West Virginia Learns is going to go up, which will increase 186 across the board,
Yeah,
making the total over 5 years well exceeding the $1 million mark if everything stayed the same. And we believe up the top, it is front end loaded, but it's front end loaded while we have the COVID money. And then when the COVID money goes away, you can see that number drops down, which really is going to help us with our budgeting. And the other thing that I've said twice already, I want to reiterate, the student population that participates in this are students that we're pulling in to our enrollment that would most likely opt not to be in Berkeley County schools if it wasn't for this option.
and I can tell you that in this particular school year, I've teetered on whether or not my son's gonna be doing this next year. I've teetered back and forth because the curriculum that he's learning online is probably the same as what West Virginia Learns is doing. So I mean, it's right there in line. So I mean, I'm teetering on that. The only other thing I would say, Jackie, is to kind of reiterate on the West Virginia Learns, where it was $1,200 maybe before. That was several years ago. I don't think it's gonna be $1,200. Me personally, in looking at the costs of education from that homeschool perspective, it's gonna go up. I don't know what that looks like percentage wise, but I can almost guarantee you it's not gonna be pre-COVID money dollar amount. It's gonna be more.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. You were talking about adopting the curriculum in Berkeley County. Do we have people who are gonna be doing that, or we're gonna have to hire additional people through this process?
In that process, we would like to use Berkeley County teachers to do that. So I'm confident that I think there are enough Berkeley County teachers that want to be involved in this process and would like to do this, and so we would be having them do that.
I'm just wondering about unforeseen costs here, whether we're getting into something that we're buying something from another person that we're going to own and be able to tailor to our system. But what other costs will that entail
I think,
above this figure in your head?
right, I think the maintenance is something that realistically is something that's always gonna have to be looked at. So that's one thing about it is, once we get rid of an outside vendor like West Virginia Learns or Stride, who are in charge of all their technical issues, we're gonna have to, you know, if the link breaks or if something's missing or something's not working, we're the ones that are gonna have to figure out and fix that instead of calling them up and finding that out. But
What kind of costs would that be?
right now, I think that the team that we have in place would be able to handle that.
It could be, as, we believe it's gonna grow, you know, it could be to the point where we need a person to be able to do that. There are 6 employees that are full-time for virtual school, 4 of them are instructors. If this continues to grow, you figure on average about 5,000 per student coming in. Times 200 students, every 200 students that are enrolled, that's 200 that get added to Berkeley County's enrollment. It's about $1 million this program would be bringing in every year. And that's another reason why we kept the K-5 to bring in that portion of enrollment to students. We think it's the best thing for the county, but also it pays for itself and helps pay for some other things, because we're not using all of the money that those students bring in for virtual school.
Okay, that was my one question. I was just wondering, do you see any other staffing needs that this is going to generate? I mean, let's just say we have stagnation in the numbers. Do you see any other costs that we may have that's both 4 lead teachers and 30 adjunct?
Not, if we stay at this number, I think that's manageable. If enrollment goes higher than that, then I think that's we've kind of worked over the last 2 years with an enrollment around 300 to 500. So.
I'd like to know on this end, if we buy the horse, how much the oats going to cost for it. That's it.
One thing I'll point out, is, 10 years ago, there was not something that people would generally look at that would be appealing for a virtual school for kids that are in grade school. Now, especially after COVID, I know for mine, it's been a huge thing for my 2. And those are just for my 2. I can't imagine how, had the benefit for so many others. And I believe that that's only going to continue. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if you look at the online schools for colleges 10 years ago, it is a completely different landscape than what college looks like online now. So I can only see this continuing to gain momentum. Are we at a place where we're going to be replacing all of our physical schools with virtual schools? No, I don't think so. But it gives the option for parents who see, or even teachers who see that kids are just learning maybe a little bit better or easier virtually versus maybe sitting in a classroom, whether that be because of an issue that's going on, mentally, or it's just, there's no distraction the way that there could be in the classroom. So.
Well, the item before us requires a motion on action item 11.1. Are there any other questions? Yes. Okay, need a motion? Thank you.
So
Okay, motion by Ms. Powers, second by Mr. Martin. Are there any amendments to the motion? Okay, we're on the motion, discussion on the motion. Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it, ayes, we have declared the motion passed. All right, now we're down to item 11.2. Ms. Law.
Mrs. Powers and I, with principal surveys were, to Ms. Powers' house. And she said she had 27 of them back, and we're going to divide them between us and compile the results and have one, she either will get her results to me or I'll get my results to her, and then we'll have one, document, one report, and then we'll bring that back and give it to the board members and present it to Mr. Stevens.
Okay, for the audience's awareness, practice that we've started here initially was that we would appoint two people to a project. For example, Mr. Martin and Mr. Wright worked with Mr. Stevens when they were working on one of the school bond issues. But we found out that we cannot even have two people, even though it's lack of a quorum, we cannot have two people working on something that's a policy generator. Disappointed in that, but that's an ethics thing, and we were told after we had done some of these small committee projects, and I want this board to be an active board. So we had this one committee working, and we had a motion that we were going to do something, but they can't do it because they can't sit down and work together on a project. So what they're doing is to comply with the ethics decision to not have two people working together as a thing. They're going to compile the results, swap the results, checking each other's work, and still be in compliance with the law and the ethics commission, that we're not violating any rule. So that's the motion here. I guess Ms. Long is going to make, and Ms. Powell will be seconding, and that's the purpose. Is we want to make sure this board is carrying out projects, but doing it in the compliance with the open meetings and ethics law. And so, Ms. Long, I recognize you.
Well, my motion is just what I had said earlier, that Ms. Powers and I will provide this return surveys. And between the two of us, we'll compile the results. And once we compile those results, we'll bring them back to the board and pass them out for each board member, and Mr. Stevens will have one also.
Okay, second by Ms. Power. Discussion on the motion. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it, ayes we have it, declare the motion adopted.
And with that said, I give you half of the surveys received. Technically, it's 14.
Okay.
I have 13. I can't divide that one.
Mr. Stevens, there's something. Come on down. While he's doing that, I want to commend Ms. Bobo and Dr. Stewie, and Ms. Long will be talking about this a little later here in a few minutes. Your all's help in working with Dr. Paul and putting together what we'll be talking about later. But while you have the podium, everyone, to thank you, but
thank you, sir. So to begin, this evening, members of the board, Superintendent Stevens, personnel actions, we had to recreate these on Friday because they were part of the network outage. So I apologize for the look that they're in this week. And also last week, the revisions didn't get sent to you. They were posted on board docs, but you did not receive the actual revisions. So we pulled those off and put those back on here, and that's why they were in a different color this week. So you would actually see those this week. So we do apologize and mix up in files that got to you. So to begin this week, we have now 8 new coaching appointments, 6 that were paid, 2 were unpaid. We have 1 coaching resignation. We have 2 extra duty appointments, 1 resignation of an extra duty assignment, and 3 healthcare appointments. We have 1 person with a revised leave of absence. Again, that was due to getting the student teaching permit and changes with the state and the dates there. We have 2 new professional appointments. 1 change of assignment of an individual to fill in as the interim principal at Mountain Ridge for the remainder of the year. We have 3 resignations of professional personnel and 4 new retirements of professional personnel. 3 transfers of professional personnel. 5 new substitutes, or excuse me, 5 service appointments. 1 resignation of a previous appointment due to the current appointment that's listed above. We have 3 change of assignments for service personnel. Unfortunately, we did lose 1 employee last month, so that is listed there. We have 1 resignation of a service employee, 1 retirement of a service employee, 4 transfers of service personnel, 1 correction of a transfer with an effective date to allow that move to occur. We have 1 rescinding their transfer for next school year. 1 upgrade within the classification of attaining the status of autism mentor. 1 substitute personnel, we have 8 substitute service personnel to appoint, 3 resignations of substitute service personnel. 7 new substitute teachers and 2 substitute teacher resignations for a total of 68 personnel actions for your consideration with the superintendent's recommendation.
Questions?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to kind of go into a little bit of a direction, but I want it for clarity so that everybody can hear it that are watching. Earlier this evening, we heard from several individuals. I have not heard in this list of a resignation nor a termination of any employee that would be classified as a bus operator. Am I correct?
You're correct.
Thank you. I appreciate your candor.
Anything else? Okay, have a motion to the adoption of the superintendent's recommendation, I'm sure.
Have my recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt the personnel item.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Ms. Powers, seconded by Ms. Long. Are there any amendments to the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by say aye.
Aye.
Those nay. Ayes appear to have it, ayes do have third vote to adopt. Thank you. Okay. We're going to have, are there any board announcements?
I have 1.
Yes, sir.
It come to my attention that we do have a birthday today. So I just want to make that announcement. Happy birthday, President Lindsay.
Let's call me grandfather this morning.
I move that we sing happy birthday to Mr. Anybody second my motion?
Second.
Oh. All of those in favor signify by saying aye. It's official.
I appreciate it, and I don't want to hear it. Okay, next item on the agenda. It's I appreciate the lighthearted. We've moved the item around on superintendent's announcements. I'm going to now superintendent search, and we have before us a pending contract that would invite Ms. Bobo and Mr. Dr. Stooley back down, and as long as Ms. Long to discuss this next item.
You haven't, you all received, and you have, in front of you, I think, copy of Dr. McCall's, contract for, the superintendent search facilitator. I motion that we, accept the contract, and it's Dr. Howard O'Call. Dr. Howard M. Howard O'Call, doing business as Chalkwood Kerry Water Enterprises LLC. I motion that we accept Dr. O'Call's contract that he presented to us as a superintendent search facilitator.
Okay, second to the motion.
Second.
Okay, before we go into a discussion, we're going to have staff, if you have any comments. Is everything okay with that contract?
Yeah, this contract has been reviewed by our legal services team, and communicated with Dr. O'Call, Mrs. Long on that as well, and, this lays out what is expected of your facilitator during the process, in-person visits. I know it can be a distance sometimes from Charleston, so it spells out what he's going to provide to you and what you can ask of him, during this time, as well as, attaching the state board policy 8200 regarding financials, with the contract is attached as well to cover anything.
And how much is the contract for?
It's $4,221.
On page 2.
Right.
Okay, and that's in compliance with the purchasing process.
Correct, it's under $5,000.
Right, so that's in conformity there. And, any other question? I don't want you all to sit down yet, because we're gonna talk about something else here. Any other questions for Dr. Schooley, on the contract?
It is Mr. O'Call doing any, this is draft advertisements, is he controlling the, like ad budget and any ad spend?
Our recommendation was going to be to this board that we handle that within house as much as possible. Because of the financial constraints, if you would, he put that in his bill, then it's going to throw that over that 5,000. So we can do the direct payments as well as, Mrs. Bobo's team, have the graphic design. So there'd be more graphics and, information that's laid out versus a line classified ad that might be provided, so that way we can provide you with the best service for the candidate.
And I believe you all did this when we did the last superintendent search, that's right?
Which we were going to discuss on our item 14 here too.
Yeah, but as far as to answer the question, this is a similar approach to the further questions, about the, contract itself. Contract involves 2 visitations, knowledge, lodging, being, plus fee for your services, about $2,000, I think, $2,200. I mean, the actual rate. We may, in the process, as I recall the last time, we did that with Murphy's. You have an interview process that he will be available for that process. That may be several days. Staff would deal with the lodging, but everything Dr. Call does in the selection process, it's outside of this organization. Board of them. There'll be the 5 board members and the Dr. Call talking about the process. So you also have a timeline, but let's dispose of this issue here first.
I did have one question. It says, as an assistant board, has requested screening applicants and selecting candidates to be interviewed. But I thought it was my understanding that, that was, he would just be receiving them, HR would actually be screening them to make sure that they have all the necessary requirements. That's one to make sure that that was clear.
Typically, he will work with you to determine, like, after you've seen your community input and how that you've accepted that, he'll work with the board from one of the documents that I've seen that he's produced for you to determine what characteristics you're looking at, get you prepared to evaluate the interviews, as well as the resumes as you're going through that. We will not see the resumes unless you choose for us to say, but that'll be directly with you and Dr. Cobb. we can assist in my department in looking at certifications that are current in the state of West Virginia and looking those up for him. But if somebody, as you see in your notice of advertisement, if somebody needs to know coming from out of state what are the requirements, we would refer them, as he is suggesting, to the Department of Ed, so that they know that they can check mark the boxes as needed.
Okay, okay.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor of approving, Ms. Long's motion, second by Ms. Power. On the contract for Dr. Call, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
No.
And let the record show that the motion passed 4-1 with one no, and Mr. Martin would like to ask. Thank you.
Just a note for my vote, just with Mr. Call, I know the process of what's gonna be. I'm glad that we have an outside facilitator, but I was thinking about while we're sitting here, I forgot to mention it. Putting this item before this, I like is a little weird for me, but just us searching for a new superintendent, I think we're making the wrong decision, so that is my vote for putting this facilitator before approving the contract for a facilitator before better notice of the superintendent. I think we're making a mistake and spending money we don't need to.
Well, facilitator can't, facilitate anything. If he facilitated the notice of position availability, he can't facilitate that unless he's approved.
Okay, we're beyond debating the motion, we've already passed it and everything. Okay, I would like to now allow Ms. Bobo and Dr. Schooley to and Ms. Long to talk about just some more updates on the the process that you all been working, you alluded to them. Could you, I was impressed by what I read that you all have put together.
Well, we looked at this very closely over with Ms. Long, kind of to get her opinions of what areas that she wanted to go based upon the guidance that Dr. Call had given at the previous 2 board meetings that you had spoken with them. And the previous 2019 timeline to do that. What we've put together here is following that similar stance with a 3-week posting period to allow you to gain those resumes and applications during that time. And then following that, a fairly quick moving, so there is flexibility in the timeline and schedule to give you a lot of time for deliberation as well as negotiation at the end. So we front loaded that really heavy, really quickly so that you can get to that point. Especially now, given that the neighboring county will be doing the same search at the exact same time here with the retirement that occurred today. So it's very important that we get out with our designed ads. Ms. Bobo's department has designed different ads out there for different sizes that are in actual newspapers. Newspaper publishing, she's found out has really increased in prices over the last few years, where a lot of the trade journals are staying about the same out there from the pricing we pay. So we think the cost there will be about the same or just a little higher, given that the newspaper prices have increased for advertisement during this time period.
Anything else?
I would like, Mrs. Bobo to expound upon what all she did with the superintendent search website and the timeline and the update.
Yeah, sure. So,
And the community impact.
there'll be, we purchased, special URL, bcssupersearch.com, and .org. We purchased them both just in case someone would enter one and be trying to find the other one, it would put them in the same place. So it'll be on the Berkeley County Schools website, where the posting will, for the superintendent position, will be placed along with the timeline. We are also proposing the same survey, community survey that we distributed in our last search. We can start that as early as this week. and close it, I think we were looking at, I think it was gonna be open from February 8th to the 19th. And then we will get those results back to you so that you can use those results to help inform your decisions about the resumes that you receive. We will also, in addition, be using social media, and we are looking to purchase a listserv of superintendents and assistant superintendents in about 5 neighboring states.
The benefit of using the online survey, last time we had over 1,700 community stakeholders and staff. So we got a very wide range of input for a survey of this nature, and we're seeing fairly high return rate when you see some of these surveys, when you're doing that large of a survey group. So we felt that that'd be a great way for you to get that. Given when you look under the second half of the recommended schedule, your meeting schedule is coming up over the next few months with more LSIC meetings, statutory meetings, as you heard this evening, another budget work session. So your meetings are very heavy loaded already, then add in a few special meetings for this search. We'll get a lot, so if we could get that to keep the time to provide you with input, we thought that would be more helpful to you.
Questions?
With the newspaper ads, are you just doing print or digital?
There'll be a combination of both, and we'll be using papers in the tri-state area as well as papers in our larger cities in West Virginia.
Okay. Do you think people looking for that are qualified to be superintendent will be looking at classified ads in newspapers?
We'll be running them in Run a Press, so they'll be in the main section of the paper. That's where I think a more professional person would be looking. And this, it was our understanding that the board wanted to use print in the local area, so that was, we did pursue that.
And we discussed this heavily about which papers it should be in several times, and Ms. Long even questioned putting it in the Charleston Gazette, but it's not necessarily that's the candidate you're looking for. Now the individuals at the Department of Ed, the legislature, they see you're searching for a superintendent, so you might not necessarily be hitting, okay, we're getting a candidate out of it, you're getting other eyeballs on your ad. That's important to make sure that they see the process is playing itself out at the same time.
We'll also be using a lot of the superintendent associations, as well as Ed Week. We'll have a display ad and an online presence for that as well.
I was saying like just put in as much ad dollars into like LinkedIn sponsored posts and Indeed sponsored posts and any association.
We are going to be buying some of them.
And anything about other eyeballs on the actual ad themselves.
I do want to thank them. They put so much work into this, and the knowledge that they have from the past search and what they did, it's just tremendous. So they worked really hard.
Okay. Further questions? Yeah, do we need a motion? You all.
What we would like for you to do is go ahead to this evening and approve your notice of position vacancy, so we can take the word draft off of it. That would allow Elaine to make the links active on the website, as well as to put that out there, so it can begin working with Dr. Paul to get those started tomorrow in purchasing.
The motion is approve the notice of action.
Position availability.
Position availability. Do I have a motion for the motion recommended?
Yes, I make a motion to accept the notice of position availability and put it out there, possibly tomorrow, possibly.
Second by Mr. Wright. Okay, discussion on the motion. Michael, did you want to make any comments now? Because we had you commenting after the motion last time. I'm sorry.
With the residency, they continue, is this the residency, just making sure I'm putting clear on it. They have to live, they can live in Jefferson or Morgan within the contract.
They can live Berkeley, Jefferson, or Morgan by state code.
By state code. Can we make a motion for them to have to reside in Berkeley?
I think you'd need to get Kim on the phone probably to answer that question, based on the last discussion when we started talking about that. It's gonna be harder. I mean, you can stress upon it and push a little bit on it, but it could be harder to actually technically require them, given that the legislature has given them the ability to live in a continuous county.
She said that the precedence, I don't think was there, if I'm remembering correctly, based on what we've done previous with other superintendents. So the only question I have is, do we know, and this might be a question for Kim. Let's say the person is from, Kanawha County. Is there the possibility that we're gonna have to give them a time frame to be able to find a place here? I mean, I'm thinking maybe worst case scenario, you have like 10 offers on one house. And you lose the offer. I mean, I'm trying to think of.
That's something we can talk about in our discussions. with
Okay,
them.
okay, that's fine. I just didn't know, so I apologize.
Okay, other questions about the posting of the position? Okay, Michael, did you want to say anything else?
Just discussion of what you're saying. Because I believe, Mr. Stevens is a very qualified candidate. Very, very qualified candidate, worked his entire career for this position. He's, I said it earlier, he's not from the area, but made this area his home. So there's no good old boy network that anyone can say, but I believe this sends a wrong signal to the community that we're not supporting our superintendent. We're looking elsewhere and spending taxpayer dollars elsewhere. So I will leave it on for notice.
Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
No.
Okay. Let the record reflect that the vote is 4-1, with Mr. Martin in the negative. Thank you all. Okay, we're going to have the superintendent's announcements now, and during this, we're going to go, after he's made his public announcements, we're going to go into executive session to discuss a law enforcement issue. So that would be the thing, right?
Could be.
Okay.
We'll call whatever you want, it's your birthday.
It's been a lousy birthday. No, it's a good, that's, look,
So, for announcements here, at this meeting, I just wanted to go back and say congratulations, on our ACE Award winner, Holly, Ridley. She's phenomenal. Appreciate everything that she does. Did want to, again, say happy birthday to, Mr. Murphy. I do want to say that this week is National, School Counseling Week. School counselors actively engage in helping students examine their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents. They work with teachers and other educators to provide an educational system where students can realize their potential and set healthy, realistic, and optimistic aspirations for themselves. School counselors are certified, experienced educators with a master's degree in school counseling. The combination of their training and experience makes them an integral part of the total educational program, and we would be remiss if we didn't recognize them this week, especially in light of the last few years and the increased need that we've had for attention for our students. I do want to say thank you for serving our schools to our school resource officers. They are truly a valuable resource. Get to play on the resource. I just want to say that. I threw that in myself.
Thought there was more to come.
Sorry, Jess, I did that. That's my fault. Didn't play well.
I'm looking over at him and he's got this face like, yeah.
Well, I nailed that for those guys. Appreciate everything that they do, put their neck on the line for us, but being a part of our community and being a school resource officer is something special. I do appreciate them. We have kicked off Black History Month, started on February the 1st. Our Equity and Inclusion Department has hosted read alouds throughout the county in honor of the month. The events will continue throughout the month as Dr. Alfonso, who is here with us tonight, and Mr. Williams, along with other volunteers, read to students. One of my favorite days as a high school principal was when we held mock interviews. The students have a nervous aura about them. They're dressed up, they're clean cut, they are really interested in improving themselves, and I enjoyed just the demeanor of the school absolutely changed on these days because they felt important, they looked important, they were proud of the way they looked, walking around the hallways all dressed up. So mock interview schedules are set, they're coming. I hope that members of our board get an opportunity to volunteer and go meet some of our students. So I think that'll be a great thing. Dates to remember, coming up. We have the Berkeley County Social Studies Fair on February the 11th at Musselman Middle School. High school parent teacher conferences are on February the 15th. Early dismissal for Faculty Senate Day on February the 17th. Wanted to make that announcement. And there's a PL Day with that's professional learning, by the way, with no students on February the 20th. Just want to make those announcements to everybody here. Our next regular scheduled meeting is February the 20th. It will be here. I apologize. It will be in Martinsburg at Martinsburg High School auditorium. We are going to start there. We're going to do the calendar hearing at 4:45 for that 15 minutes, and then the LSIC starts at 5 o'clock.
4:45.
Any questions for the superintendent? Any announcements? Okay, we're going, I'm going to motion here in a moment, but just for staff, we're not going to have any actions after the executive session. We're going to go in for a law enforcement issue. And when we come out, just so staff already has this, Mr. Wright, would you make the motion when we come out to adjourn for the evening? And with Mr. Martin, would you second that motion? Yes. Okay, that'll happen so that you all don't have to stick around if we're tied up for a while. I need a motion now to go into the executive session for purposes of law enforcement issue. Second. Discussion of the motion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Okay, we're going to go into executive session. I do have to sign some papers.